Sword of Coming Chapter 1251. Chapter 1251 20 People and Candidates 9. The sky and the earth are long and the night light is dim. The green vegetation and trees are strange and suddenly green mountains are seen under the water. When Weishi appeared together with the astonishingly short old Taoist priest, there were 4 empty chairs and 2 hosts had not yet appeared. It seems that we still need to wait for someone. They were still talking about Azu and there were 2 new members of the 14th realm including Weishi. Unexpectedly, Weishi turned out to be one of the people behind this ancestral master hall, which made many members present take aback. Reassurance, after all, the situation is changing now and the cultivators have caught up with the good times. Overtly and covertly, there are more and more people who have achieved enlightenment and ascended to the level of 2 hands. If there is no more 14th person in their ancestral hall, it seems almost meaningless to sit in charge. Sword cultivator Zhou Xian, who participated in the discussion for the first time, felt that the trip was worthwhile. Someone asked directly, "Senior, have you already joined the Tao?" Weishi said, "There is actually not much difference between the previous Ascension realm and the current new 14th. Not many people can say such big words. Since the rightful owner said so, they didn't have the nerve to say congratulations. A stick of incense has not yet burned out. 22 chairs in total with a few empty seats." Weishi, who was still standing, smiled and said, "You can still chat for a while. No one is timid to be able to sit down here, so someone asked out of curiosity, 'Who is this Taoist priest?' The old Taoist priest sitting cross-legged on one of the main seats, turned a deaf ear. From time to time he stretched out his hand to touch his sleeves, his palms full of golden crumbs. Weishi did not give a precise answer but said something general, "I also want to call you senior." The old Taoist priest closed his eyes and said, "We are going in the same direction, walking on the same path, just call each other Taoist friends." Weishi smiled and said, "Senior is older and has joined the Tao earlier. It is not an exaggeration to call him senior." The old Taoist priest opened his eyelids and glanced at Weishi, who was still unwilling to sit down opposite. Immortal Yunjia was shocked in his heart, another 14th realm. And judging from Weishi's tone, this Taoist priest is still an old 14er? As soon as Weishi said this, everyone's guesses were confirmed. For a moment, everyone had different expressions. After all, guesses are just guesses. When they knew the facts, they would inevitably have a different mood. As a result, they became more and more curious about the owners of the other 2 chairs. Azu Weishi's dojo is located in Qishan Mountain. There are 36 peaks in the whole mountain and the peaks are like a circle. That's why Weishi calls himself Master of 37 Peaks. When Weishi was young, his aptitude for Taoism was very good, so he liked to travel around the world and make friends all over the world. Weishi was even more sharp and did not care about making enemies on all sides. It's a pity that such a proud man who has excelled on the road has gone from a young ascendant who has the most hope of reaching the 14th realm to an old ascendant who is least likely to succeed. You must know that those who lost to Weishi back then, as well as those who were following behind and eating ashes on the path of cultivation at the same time, can barely be called those who are behind them, but they are not ordinary people. The style of the Taoists who lived in the same era as Weishi was overshadowed by Weishi and became dim without exception. Perhaps people like Weishi can be called the kind of truly unconventional people. At that time, Weishi had a widely circulated and extremely arrogant statement, after he defeated several fellow monks in a duel. "You are a once-in-century genius, he is a once-in-century figure, and so am I, and so are everyone. We are really in trouble for this 100-year period." It is universally recognized that Weishi is the #1 immortal since ancient times, and his name is higher than that of Su Luoweizhu and other immortals. And this Su Lu Huaizhou is Su Zi and Lu Qi as well as Huai Yin, the sword immortal Zhou Xian. Besides, there was also Hulong Zhenren from Luzhou in Beiju who also lost to Weishi. There were discussions and fights on the mountain and Weishi won 96 games in a row. Either they are fighting in the same territory or they are fighting against the enemy across the border. There is no weak opponent to defeat them. It was just that during the turmoil over the word North that year, when faced with the cross-sea sword challenge between Zhu Luzhou sword cultivator, Weishi never showed up from beginning to end. In the eyes of the outside world, it was because Weishi was too ambitious and dared to retreat to the 14th realm just a few years after his ascension, which led to the failure of Hadao. He became disheartened and ignored worldly affairs. The absence of Weishi made Lu Kaishan, who was in charge of the overall situation, seem a bit helpless. Therefore over the years the Qi practitioners in Azu had some resentment towards Weishi and Jishan. If Baidi City is a good place for wild cultivators in the world, then Taishu Mountain in the Middle Earth and Qi Mountain in Azu are both excellent dojos for spirit practitioners. Yu Fushan, who is now serving as the guardian of Taiping Mountain, has longed for the dojo of the old way, and has coveted several mountains including Lianri Peak and Moon Worship Mountain for a long time. Don't look at the latecomer Huolong Zhenren, who often teases Wei Shi by saying that it may not be good if he is young. But among the disciples Yuan Lingdian, Wei Shi's evaluation of Wei Shi is extremely high. Generally speaking, Lu Qi and Zhou Mi's Lu Jin realm, Lu Yan's golden core realm, and Wei Shi and Yao Qing's nascent soul realm are all Scorpion's pull daddy their only share. Yuan Lingdian feels that Master's statement of one share seems inappropriate. The old man criticized this ignorant direct descendant, saying that he should not be too rigid in his conduct, and should not mingle words when speaking, just understand the general meaning. And who did Wei Shi lose to in the 97th Battle of Martial Arts has always been an unsolved mystery that makes people extremely curious. Qin Pingan is one of the few who knows the answer because Wu Shuangjiang took the initiative to mention this matter when they reunited at the Sword Qi Great Wall last time, claiming that he had a fight with Wei Shi before leaving Haoran World and going to Qingming World. Wu Shuangjiang spoke more reservedly at the time, saying that he regretted it now and should not have made things worse for Wei Shi. Wei Shi asked from the bottom of his heart, "Senior, can you deduce the situation at Han Yushu's side?" The old Taoist priest nodded and said, "Tell this fellow Taoist all the information about his birth date and other information with the poor Taoist." After a while the old Taoist priest put his hands in his sleeves, stretched out his hands, shook his sleeves and said, "I have returned to Tao Mountain." Replacing this elegant expression with a colloquial one is dead. Wei Shi was not too surprised, he just said two words, which was a pity. The old Taoist priest said slowly, "Don't reveal too much about the secret of heaven." The poor Taoist can only say that he provoked an old man who shouldn't be provoked. Then Han Yushu inherited the ancestral business and sat on the blessed land of 3 mountains. He mistakenly thought that he was destined to return and was in a blessing. He doesn't hesitate to be blessed, but he doesn't know that when he really leaves the blessed land he is destined to suffer this calamity. In the final analysis he is still used to being a frog at the bottom of the well, his vision is narrow and he doesn't know how wide the sky is outside. Wei Shi declined to comment. The old Taoist priest said, "While the other 2 haven't arrived yet, fellow Taoist Wei, tell me about the century-old situation here. The older ones and the younger ones can each pick 10 people to talk about." When Wei Shi was thinking about selecting the characters, everyone here could remove the blindness. Except for Lu Miao and Du Shanin, the other dozen or so people put away all kinds of magical powers and chose to show their true appearance. Yun Jia was in a complicated mood and all the answers to the mystery finally came to light today. "I saw a woman with picturesque eyebrows and a sword on her back, wearing a round-neck brocade robe with a vulture pattern, a hairpin on her head, a neck as white as snow, and a dragon-shaped gold necklace with a yellow embroidered rope. Look at her with a lot of side eyes." Because of her special status, Luo Shan, a female swordsman from the old Summer Palace hidden official lineage, and Zhuan are both Shao Sun's right-hand men. Luo Shan was a Jade Pu realm swordsman when he left the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and now he is a great swordsman. She was the one who reminded some people not to be too casual when talking about Qin Pingan. Yun Gao deflected his gaze a little and saw a few acquaintances, who were famous in all continents. There are 4 recognized big mountains in Liuxia continent, Qinggong Mountain in Jinghao, Tianyu Cave in Shunan Yuan, Fengsuan sect where Chao Gun is located, and Liaoshui where 2 immortals came from. The current head of Liaoshui is Immortal Qin Zhao, whose Taoist name is Xin Chan. Looking at him he was just a handsome young man in white clothes. His junior sister Zhou Xian is also an immortal. There are 2 immortals in one sect and their momentum is not weak. But the last time the person who attended the meeting of the Zhongtu Confucian Temple was not him as the sect leader, but Zhou Qian the headmaster. This in itself is a kind of expression of the Confucian Temple. At this moment, the young man in white clothes crossed his legs and whistled towards the caged parrot with a relaxed attitude. Next to Qin Zhao he happens to be a close neighbor of his sect and the master of Tianyu Cave Shunan Yuan, whose Taoist name is Jiao Ming. Shunan Yuan also has many elegant self-signs and nicknames, such as Zhuangxi, Hanren, Tui Gong, etc. This new ascended realm man is an extremely wealthy man with narrow eyes. If he were walking in the market with his Taoist companion, he would probably have a typical appearance of a wealthy man and a wealthy woman. It is said that there was once a foreigner who was so bold that he dared to say something from the bottom of his heart to his face that he believed to be fair. He always felt that my nephew Shu, who suffered from heatstroke, was not your biological child. Why don't you do a blood test? However, Xunyuan's main path is extremely hidden. However, the old Taoist priest could see through this man's true identity at a glance. It is said that fishermen in the East China Sea once saw small insects nesting in mosquito eyelashes, and the book also said that Buddha saw a bowl of water with 48,000 insects. There is also a graceful old man in a Confucian shirt, Duan Qingchen, who calls himself Li Jing. At a young age, he became the deputy principal of an academy in Nanbosu Island. It seems that he later had many conflicts with Chen Chunan. He had an impatient personality and left the academy on his own initiative in anger. It was this person who once made a sarcastic remark about sitting on the sidelines during a certain meeting. He wanted to see how Chen Chunan was such a monopolistic scholar. Among them was a tall, thin old man, who seemed to be deliberately targeting Yunjia, knowingly asking, "Where is the white jade Ganoderma lucidum from fellow Taoist Wuxia?" This person is wearing a yellow robe and comes from the Lu family in central China. His name is Lu Su, his Taoist name is Huang Yu. He is old and has a high seniority. He is of the same seniority as Lu Wei, who is from the same lineage of the clan, and has an irreversible relationship. In addition, Lu Su is also the leader of the Lu family's Tiantai Siken division. Yunjie sneered and said, "You can give your belongings to whomever you want. Why do fellow Taoists care about the East and the West, the sky and the earth? Do you have any control over it?" Lu Su snorted coldly. Obviously, Yun Qiao's words of governing heaven and governing earth hit his weak point. Zozi talks about the sky and the Lu family talks about the earth. Each accounts for half of the Yin and Yang family. In this way, the Lu family in Zhongtu really has no control over heaven. During the discussion in the Confucian temple, the immortal Yunjia had a conflict with the young hermit official because of a certain proud disciple who liked to play tricks. In full view of the public in the Battle of Yuanyangzu, Yunjia handed over the half-immortal artifact as an apology. The white jade Ganoderma lucidum of military rank. The owner of Jiuzhen Immortal Pavilion is also a very famous handsome man. Yunjia was born with a face like a crown jade, white robes and white shoes, and a snow-white whisk with a jade handle on her arm, plus a white jade Ganoderma lucidum, which gave her an extraordinary air of immortality and good looks. Taoist companion Weizi is also in the immortal realm. She has better luck than Yunzhu and owns most of the broken misty blessed land. She was in retreat. If she hadn't lit 9 sticks of incense this time as the guardian of the retreat, Yunjia would definitely not have been distracted by coming here to discuss matters. Nowadays, in the Zongzitu Immortal Mansion, which family does not have a few secluded ancestors and young geniuses? There is another burly man sitting next to one after another. He wears a golden crown on his head and a mask hiding his face. Only a pair of black eyes are exposed on his face like a dark well. 2 arms from the wrist to the shoulder are full of entanglements. A series of bracelets, each depicting the faces of men and women. The man and woman between the bracelet beads on both sides have either malicious or lingering eyes, or ferocious or tender faces. Every pair of crazy men and resentful women, looking at each other across the sea, has a dark red light that pulls each other, making the 2 towering resentments and lingering emotions linger around the masked man's body at the same time, and the little bits of light merge into the golden crown above his head. This person said sadly, "Fellow Lu Xia is indeed upright." Nan Guangzhou died suddenly, leaving a leaderless sect. He immediately rushed over to help with the funeral arrangements. The spiritual veil sent by Jiuzhen Immortal Hall is really eye-catching. Being able to support orphans and righteous people, Nan Guangzhou is really accurate in judging people. Lu Su laughed endlessly. Being righteous? You have to have a good appetite, right? It's not that the direct descendants are better than the direct descendants. It's not that the biological son is better than the biological son. The master of the Yunjie Pavilion first inherited the inheritance of such a large sect, and then helped to take care of the descendants. But it's not knowing when the 2 cases merge into one we can prepare gifts and celebrate well. Yunjie waved his hand to ignore the facts and directly changed the subject, quarreling with 2. I heard that Si Tiantai was smashed by someone? The cold temple built in the wilderness was also targeted by Gao Xuandu. Already? Lu Su choked for words. Saying it didn't collapse doesn't seem to be something worth bragging about. There is a burly man who lives in a cold temple of obscenity, and he doesn't want to talk more about this household matter. Of course Yun Jie knew why these two were targeting him. It was because of Zhou Xian Immortal Hall's actions on Fuyao continent, which blocked people's way of making money. Now among the Lu family members, the only ones who are his equal or one generation above him are the family heads Lu Xun, Lu Zai and Lu Wei. Previously, Qin Pingon and two sword cultivators broke through all the restrictions, appeared in Si Tiantai and came to provoke each other. The commotion was huge and the paper could not contain the fire. The Lu family was famous for its internal discord and it turned out very quickly. The news came out. Note Chapter 1006 The War Begins. At that time a group of powerful people from the Lu family who were responsible for entertaining guests came out of the Zhilan department. Among them the young-looking head of the family Lu Xun was nicknamed Tianbian. He also controls the lineage of those who watch the sky. Next to him was an average-looking female cultivator Lu Zai whose nickname was Deju. Another legal lineage responsible for the more hidden identity of the Lu family is called Land Official by the monks on the mountain top. This group of descendants of the Lu family can travel between the Yang world and the underworld, walk in the underworld of Fengdu with Dharma certificates, connect with Yuming, and have a close relationship with all the major city god temples in the world. In Fuyao continent and Jinjia continent where the war was brutal and people were devastated, although Lu Su was not from this lineage, he just wanted to accumulate external skills, so he took the initiative to ask for a job, and at the same time handed over a large amount of astronomical fairy money, which made Lu Zai nod. I can earn a fortune by resting on my merits. Leading the land officials of the Lu family who respected her as their ancestor, they went to the broken mountains and rivers of the two continents, extradited tens of millions of ghosts and spirits, passed through the gate of hell, walked on the road of hell, climbed the 3-foot slope, climbed Gubishan, and then went to the hanging the Naiha bridge composed of billions of coffins, meeting the Mengpa, who has millions of clones at the same time. This is the saying that you will not shed tears without seeing the coffin. After drinking a bowl of Mengpa soup, you will have with this life a farewell. There are more than 10 Dao lines within the Lu family, which is famous for its numerous hills, but the most important ones are the 3 lines. Except for Lu Xun from the clan lineage, the other 2 lineage talkers are Lu Zai and Lu Su, especially Lu Zai, who is the least able to deal with Lu Xun, who always opposes whatever Lu Xun says. Lu Su asked, "Has the true identity of the girl in the mink hat following Shanju Qin been confirmed? Fellow Daoist here, who knows? According to the rules here, it costs money to buy information from others. However, the specific price can be discussed privately." The girl in the mink hat called her a thief, which made Lu Su feel very vindictive. Just because Lu Xun issued a murderous decree of the head of the family, in the next 100 years, no one is allowed to deduce the yin and yang skills related to Qin Pingon without authorization. Once discovered, he will be expelled from the family. According to the family law, the monk's memory will be deleted, all branches of Lu's magic will be cut out, and then randomly thrown into the mountains of a continent, becoming a walking corpse that retains some true spirit. In fact, this sentence was meant for Lu Zai and Lu Su. Lu Xun was staring at the two of them. After they nodded, Lu Xun turned to other topics. Luo Shan smiled and said, "I know. Buy one get one free." After Luo Shan revealed the identity of the girl in the mink hat from his heart, he also added a series of reminders. Fellow Daoist Lu should be careful when going out from now on. It is best not to show up alone outside. Bai Jing likes it best and is also the best at sneak attacks. She is a swordsman and she is proficient in many methods. Bai Jing is not just as simple as grabbing the road number. Luo Shan intentionally or unintentionally looked at a chair where someone else was sitting. It was once the luxurious seat of the criminal officer. And the old ascending Nan Guangzhou, who was targeted by this ascending realm sword cultivator, was already dead. Lu Su had actually known about the realm of the girl in the mink hat for a long time. It was absolutely impossible for a fairy-level swordsman to kill Lu Xun's Yin Shen with his sword on the Lu family's territory. But when her identity became clear, an ascended realm swordsman, an old monster who had lived for more than 10,000 years, and the Taoist name Bai Jing made Lu Su feel empty. Luo Shan suddenly asked, "Last time when the young official visited the Lu family, you did your best to help him deduce the fortune of Fuyao Island?" Lu Su frowned. "Is there such a thing?" Could it be that Zhou Xian had secretly reached some kind of tacit agreement with Qin Pingon to play the double act between himself and Lu Zai? For example, Qin Pingon privately promised Zhou Xian to allow the latter to observe Taoism? Luo Shan had some calculations in his mind and said helplessly, Yin Guan's mouth can really trick even water ghosts into landing. Yun Jie's expression was indifferent and he said a few disgusting words lightly. Why should he care about it? In the past, the person Lu Su liked to be in tit-for-tat with was Tian Wan. One is the junior sister of Tan Tianzhou, who monopolizes half of the Yinyang family, and the other is the old patriarch who talks about earth and land. It would be strange not to have a few words of quarrel. It doesn't matter as long as Taoist companion Wei Zi comes out of seclusion. Zhou Immortal Pavilion will shock the eyes of the world. With an Ascension Realm person in charge, Zhou Immortal Pavilion can truly become one of the first-class sections. Although Yun Jie is not a mountain god, his Taoist companion Wei Zi is qualified to light a stick of mountain incense and salute Tongyi's Hao from a distance. They once tried their best to secretly help Mr. Zheng, Master Qin, to fill the gap in the continent. Taoist couple Wei Zi, as a landlord, holds the smog-filled blessed land. The land is thousands of miles away. It seems to be full of ghosts, miasma, and ghosts living in groups. But if you look at it with the technique of looking at the qi, it turns out that there is a clear spirit and Tao Qi in the world. Pei Ran's great rivers and mountains. In the center of the blessed land is a high platform with landscape restrictions, towering into the clouds. From here the owner Wei Zi can inspect the dynamics of the entire smoky blessed land, peel off the turbid air and get rid of evil spirits. After years of hard work and spending countless amounts of fairy money, the couple has built several orderly and majestic cities, in which ghosts and ghosts live, pavilions, and flowers. If a cultivator from the underworld with a low level of realm accidentally enters it, he will simply not be able to distinguish between life and death and the darkness. It is clearly a means of recreating the world of heaven. When the war came to an end, Yun Jie joined hands with his Taoist companions and secretly visited Jinjia continent and Friao continent several times to clean up the battlefield and clean up the mess. He used various secret methods to gather ghosts that had lost human sacrifices in the underworld and collected those ghosts that were about to lose their true spirits. The ferocious Yin spirits who turned into evil ghosts brought tens of thousands of lonely ghosts back to the sect again and again. During this period he and his Taoist companions spent countless amounts of their spiritual energy, and more than 100 treasures collapsed on their own during the process. Giving thousands of ghosts a place to go is naturally of great merit. At that time I was visiting the misty blessed land with the young hermit official, Qing Tong Tao, who has a long history and wider experience. It is speculated that in the blessed land, an expert built a bridge across the river connecting the underworld, and the female fairy Wei Zi, who is the owner of the blessed land, is the legendary Bang Bearer on the mountain. Yun Jie was very confident at the moment. The Taoist couple relied on the misty blessed land to accumulate merits, and their merits were perfected. The bottleneck of the immortal realm was loosened, and when it was about to be broken, Wei Zi had already started to retreat. As long as she successfully escapes from seclusion, she will be able to successfully overcome the tribulation and hope to rise to the top. But what really makes Yun Jie feel that this Taoist couple's retreat is bound to be a success is the external help of reciprocity of courtesy, which helps Wei Zi truly achieve the right time, place, and people. Otherwise, who would dare to say certainly that any immortal will attain enlightenment? Surely it won't work. At that time Mr. Zheng and the Ascension Realm servant came quietly and left secretly. Wei Zi believed most of the identities of Master Qin and Mr. Zheng, but she still didn't dare to believe them all. However, Lu Qiqing from the Liulik Pavilion in Baidi City had hidden his whereabouts not long ago, visited the Zhou Immortal Pavilion in person, and quietly brought a message to the Taoist couple. Pavilion Master Lu didn't even look at Pavilion Master Yunqi, but only looked at the ghost fairy Wei Zi, saying that it was Xing Dan, the swordsman who was about to become their Baidi City guard, and that she would help hand out a sword at the critical moment. Help Wei Zi take a step at the last moment and successfully overcome the disaster. Helping the ghost fairy Wei Zi achieve enlightenment and ascend, the sword fairy Xing Dan will also gain something, and each has its own benefits. Generally speaking, who dares to let an outsider dictate? The selection of a guardian is a top priority, and retreat ants must be very cautious in this matter. The literary master at the foot of the mountain entrusted Si Wen A person who practices Taoism is equivalent to entrusting his entire wealth and life. The guardian must be a high-level person who is also morally responsible, willing to take on tasks and capable of taking on tasks. He must not let his guard down at critical moments. For example, he must be both willing and able to share in the natural calamity. According to the custom of guarding the barrier for others, as long as the monk successfully escapes from the barrier, no matter what happens or whether he protects the barrier or not, he can get a big red envelope, which is regarded as a good fortune. In history, there are many people who thought it was just a formality and just get a red envelope. Unexpectedly, an accident happened in the middle of the retreat. When the disaster was approaching, the guardians saw that the opportunity was not good and retreated. He just sent out a piece of white jade Ganoderma lucidum, and the Taoist monk Wei Zi lit a stick of mountain incense according to his heart. Mr. Jing wants to return, an ascendant from Zhou Xian Immortal Hall. In this kind of business, the more the merrier. Since you have already helped Taoist companion Wei Zi, how about Mr. Jing help yourself? It might as well be to give some guidance, to clear the clouds and reveal the sun, to give you a few words of truth, or to give you a direct path to the bottleneck of the immortal realm. At that time, the immortal pavilion master looked pitifully at the Lu pavilion master. Lu Qiqing looked at this strange-looking immortal with a blank expression. One of them didn't dare to push the envelope too far and said more than a few words. It was just about the future of the road, and he didn't want to let go of a slim hope. A person like falling into the clouds. What is going on, you can tell me? Xianxia's master had some prophecy-like last words before his death, which roughly meant that the orthodoxy of Zhou Xian Immortal Hall would be carried forward in the hands of Xianxia's generation. It was not directed at Yunqi himself, but with the addition of the 3 words, this generation, which made Yunqi both reassured and worried. Don't worry, because the sect's incense is destined to be better than before. The person who is worried is naturally the one who lit the incense, not Yunqiao himself. When his Taoist companion Wei Zi lit a stick of incense in the blessed place, Yunjia knew that his master had already reached this stage. Someone curiously asked, Lu Wei from the clan lineage, he is known as the most proficient in divination and earth mirror within the Lu family. It's just that he failed to achieve enlightenment and ascended. Why did he almost die? If it weren't for a strange person with unique knowledge, Lu Wei would not have been able to represent the Lu family in China and enter the Lizhu cave heaven. After surviving the transformation of the cave sky into a blessed land, which was called a tribulation between heaven and earth, on the mountain, it stands to reason that Lu Wei, who has long been famous in the Middle-earth divine continent, will definitely attain enlightenment and ascend. It will not be reduced to the point of running to the family ancestral hall to light up lamps. The saying, hanging on the mountain, has actually been around for less than 200 years. It is said to be the first creation of a certain fool, which means that the body has died and the spirit has disappeared, and it has become a hanging image on the wall. Lu Su said angrily, someone interfered with it and the sword cut off the road ahead. Tianwan asked knowingly and smiled, I wonder who that person is? Lu Su was not used to this woman, so he sneered, it's your father, are you satisfied? Tianwan curled her lips, she couldn't have a bitch-slinging fight with this old guy. A middle-aged man wearing a cotton robe and carrying a sword. Note Chapter 447, What a coincidence, I am also a swordsman. Chapter 986, A warrior meets my bamboo tower. It was the credit card holder, Mr. Zheng. Sitting next to him was a dashing woman who turned to look at her. Qin Buyu smiled bitterly and said, Is it you? Mr. Zheng smiled and said, It's me. Qin Bai was in a complicated mood. Who could have imagined that the person sitting next to him, whom he had speculated about for many years but had no clues about, would actually have traveled together across continents for a long time, from Aquarius continent to Tongya continent. Mr. Zheng laughed at himself, perhaps I am still a ghost? Qin Bai didn't know how to answer the question for a while. In the past there were a total of 20 chairs and Qin Bai marked them all with numbers. For some people there is no need to guess their identity or their background. Participating in discussions more often, relying on the content of these people's words and the style of doing things, is actually equivalent to self-reporting one's identity. For example, Han Yushu, the leader of the Wanyao sect from Sanshan Blessed Land, opened his mouth to discuss matters, and the topics focused on Tongya continent, and he never mentioned the affairs of other continents. As for Lu Miao in Luzhou Beiju, he is a special case. Every time a stranger appears here, he is afraid that others will not know that he is the head of the Qianglin sect. For some members of the council, they have to follow one or two clues and search for pictures, and they can guess their identities, but at most they cannot be absolutely certain. For example, Qin Bai had previously guessed that Zhou Xian was from Daoist Mountain or the Sword Qi Great Wall. The remaining group are hidden very deeply, each one more slippery than the other. Their current identities and backgrounds, as well as their earliest roots, are all watertight. Mr. Zeng is among them. Qin Bai hesitated for a moment and then asked in his heart, the attack and killing in Chongyang Temple of Yushuan Kingdom, could it be Mr. Zeng's method? If this is the case, it will be very troublesome and turn the already refreshing situation into a mess. She just invited Chen Pingon to take up an important position after she was acquitted, but she sat next to the person who assassinated her? What's going on? Qin Buji didn't dare to say that he was an upright person, but he couldn't do double dealing. Mr. Zeng reached out and patted the scabbard lightly and said with a smile, although I am a sneaky person who walks in the shadow of others all the year round, I also pay attention to the fairness of my business, and I really don't want to tarnish the word swordsman. Fellow Daoist Qin, just don't worry, then this conspiracy has nothing to do with me. Qin Buyu breathed a sigh of relief. Qin Bai suddenly had an idea and continued to ask. Mr. Zeng mentioned 2 martial arts masters earlier and said that he did not dare to do business with one of them, Cui Cheng, because he was worried about being settled by the embroidered tiger, and the other Zhang Tiao wears Xiao? Zhang Tiaoxia, who was the first person in Haoran martial arts before Pei Bei, suddenly turned to Taoism with the Taoist name Longbo. It seems that from then on he regarded himself as a Qi practitioner and gave up his identity as a pure martial artist. There are different opinions on why this is so. Although I dare not directly say that Zhang Tiaoxia is greedy for life and afraid of death, this is indeed the most reasonable explanation that most Qi practitioners can think of. As for how Zhang Tiaoxia was able to turn to Taoism halfway and still retain the realm of martial arts, it is another huge mystery. If it weren't for Zhang Tiaoxia's strength, the Ascension Realm monks would not dare to provoke her easily. I believe there would be many great monks willing to explore the truth of this matter. Mr. Zeng smiled and did not answer the question. Neither admit nor deny. Qin Bai asked a rather taboo question, how dare I ask Mr. Zeng how old he is? Unexpectedly, Mr. Zeng replied truthfully, the road is hopeless and I have wasted 4,000 years. There was a lot of sadness in the words. There seems to be only one level difference between Ascension and Hadao, but how insurmountable is this chasm? If you are not in the Ascension stage, you may never be able to empathize with it. Qin Bai was slightly surprised. As a ghost and fairy like her, whenever she leaves the dojo she must be cautious, especially not to be too contaminated by the rolling world of mortals. For example, she has never been able to ascend. To a large extent it is because she is too deeply involved in the world. But if she were to concentrate on cultivating Taoism, ignore worldly affairs and pursue ascension, then she would not be Qin Buji. Qin Buyu asked, Mr. Zeng is in the Ascension realm? Mr. Zeng smiled and said, fellow Daoist Qin has many questions today. Qin Bai and the most proud man in the world were from the same country at the same time. Bai also wrote poems for it. And she is also a distinguished guest of the Bamboo Sea Cave Heaven, one of the very few who can come and go freely, but Qin Bai did not attend the Qingshan Mountain banquet. She once taught pure Qing martial arts. Qin Buyu laughed dumbly and apologized. Mr. Zeng, I'm sorry, I'm just too curious. Mr. Zeng is worthy of being a knife dealer and likes to reciprocate with courtesy. In turn he asked Qin Bai, in the assassination in Chongyang Temple, do you know who was responsible for the assassination? What is the general method? Qin Busua said helplessly, the person who was attacked was Shanju Qin. The incident happened suddenly and he was caught off guard. It was a Taoist ghost who used the body of a junior sister as a crossing to kill people. Thanks to Shanju Qin, he was cautious. It's not serious. Mr. Zeng nodded and said, most likely I want to use external skills to perfectly perform the actions of Hadao. Although this is not a superior joint road, it is at least a thoroughfare. This is the limitation of ghosts. In a sense, Qi practitioners cultivating immortality is an act of defying nature. Ghosts are even worse. Therefore, the higher their realm, the narrower the path they can take. A few years ago he accepted an unnamed disciple, a young monk from Shihao Kingdom in Aquarius Continent, who called himself Yuanj Jianming. It was under the instruction of Mr. Zeng that Jian Ming returned the stolen magic sword Mingquan to Daquan Yao family. The young man thought this was like taking off his pants to fart, and was puzzled as to what the purpose was. Mr. Zeng said that between theft and return, it belongs to the interest between heaven and earth, and there is great knowledge in it. The people who lend knives the most to do business with are pure martial artists. After all, those who learn martial arts have a limited lifespan. The longevity of a martial artist is as long as Pei Bei, the female marshal of the Duduan dynasty, but it is difficult to compare with the immortality of a middle 5-level qi practitioner. But as long as the martial arts achievement is high enough, the person who borrows the sword can make a huge profit. There is no need to put a long line to catch big fish. For example, Han Guanghu, the #1 martial artist in Jinjiazhu and a man who had dominated the world for hundreds of years, served as the national advisor of the Daquan dynasty for a period of 30 years. It is also the handiwork of Mr. Zeng. It was clear that they had bet on the Yao Empress that she would not return the national surname to the Lu royal family. If it hadn't been for the emergence of Master Lin from Ruzhou in Qingming world, Pei Bei would have been a well-deserved #1 in martial arts in the world. Chao Xi is still a bit young after all. A pure martial artist, a 20-year-old young man, wants to defeat a 200-year-old old monster. It is recognized that it is much more difficult than a 20-year-old qi practitioner defeating a 2,000-year-old Taoist. In the past, Haoran and Qingming Xianxia had very little contact with each other. Even if some great monks dropped in and returned to their respective worlds, they did not like to talk about other family affairs. There is only one exception. Not only does he run hard, he also talks a lot. Of course, it is our headmaster Lu. It was this Bai Yu Jingsan headmaster who praised Pei Bei whenever he had the opportunity, saying that the #1 martial artist in the world was finally a heroic woman. What a joy to hear. Then he ran to Yashan and took the initiative to apologize to Master Lin. Naturally, Lin Jiangxian would not care about such a false reputation, but he would not give Master Lu the opportunity to sit down on the mountain and punish himself with 3 cups. Lu Su asked in his heart, "Lu Miao, do you have a piece of someone's natal porcelain hidden there?" Sect leader Lu, who was questioned, actually did not need to answer. The rule here is that every piece of news must be self-aware of the entire truth. Lies are absolutely not allowed, and partial truths are not even allowed to mislead any member of the discussion. When Lu Miao answered, he would habitually stand up and say respectfully, "Yes. It was just once because I had someone take the colorful world and handed it over to a Taoist sect." Lu Su asked, "When did you hand it over?" Lu Miao replied, "When I learned that he became the last hidden official." Lu Su sneered, "It's really hot." Lu Su smiled and asked, "Didn't that embroidered tiger ask you for this thing?" The Qianglin sect is the largest buyer of the natal porcelain in Lizhu Cave Heaven, but as the seller of the Great Li dynasty, the master of the matter is Tui Han, the master of the country. Logically speaking, Tui Chan, who broke away from the literary sage lineage, is still half of Qin Pingan's senior brother. There is no reason to deliberately make things difficult for Qin Pingan on this matter. Lu Miao shook his head and said, "Xiuhu has never asked our Qianglin sect for this piece of porcelain from the beginning to the end." Lu Su continued to ask, "Based on the piece of porcelain in your hand, what kind of artifact can you guess that the complete natal porcelain is?" Lu Miao hesitated for a moment, then replied, "It's probably a paperweight." Lu Su asked, "A paperweight used to press books? What is its specific shape?" Lu Miao smiled bitterly and said, "It's hard to deduce." Lu Su couldn't find any more useful information, so he didn't mention the price of buying and selling information. "A few words with you, sect leader Lu, who is known as the invincible master of Jade Pu realm, will already be a huge favor for you. My Lu Zu's face is no more valuable than a few Guyu coins." Lu Su didn't take the initiative to mention it, and Lu Miao, who was like a soft persimmon after autumn, didn't ask. In the past, Qianglin Zong Lu Miao, who seemed to be at the bottom, and Wanyao Zong Han Yushu, the penultimate person opposite who was born in Sanshan Blessed Land, were like a pair of gatekeepers. It's just that, unlike Lu Miao, Han Yushu is an immortal with profound knowledge. His position is lower. Of course, it's not because he is not mature enough, but because he came here late and has little qualifications. In addition, the mountain has been closed for too long, and the sect's genealogy monks rarely go out to travel in Haoran. Information about Tongyi's Hao is blocked, and Han Yushu has very little useful information, so it is difficult to cooperate with others and exchange benefits. Now Lu Su found the strangest thing to be that Wei Shi was always standing and refused to sit down, and the seat happened to be very close to Lu Miao. Listening to Wei Shi's character Zong Fu, and then taking in all the inner thoughts and words in his ears, the old Taoist priest held the pocket flag in his arms, stretched out his hand to touch the handle of the chair and sighed. In just a few hundred years the vastness, wilderness and youth have changed. So many things have happened in the world of Ming Sanzhua, and so many new people have emerged. Although the Taoist priest has an old face, his hands are as crystal clear as jade. He was once a serious Taoist official in Qingming Tianxia, but this time he came across the world. But he was not from Qingming Tianxia, which was in chaos, but from the Western Buddhist kingdom. Perhaps the old Taoist priest felt that they were all cautious in their words and did not dare to call those monks in the 14th realm by their names, which was too uncomfortable, so the old Taoist priest offered a natal magic weapon, which was a painting with 5 stars and 28 gods. The long scroll of the picture stretched out instantly, connected end to end, like a ring, just enough to surround the entire ancestral hall. The old Taoist priest took out a longevity lantern from his sleeve, which was no higher than his arm. He threw it into the open space and inserted it into the ground. It did not cause any strange phenomena. After that he closed his eyes and rested. Wei Shi smiled and said, "You don't have to be too reserved when you speak next." Knowing that they were all curious about the identity of this old Taoist priest, Wei Shi did not help to resolve their doubts. There have been 3 major catastrophes in the history of Qingming world. He transformed into evil spirits from outside and sneaked into the human world secretly. He actually directly transformed the mountains and rivers of a state, and eventually caused the state to sink. It was a calamity. Song Maolu, a disciple of Xuandu Temple in Qizhou, led millions of rice thieves, and their momentum was so huge that it almost shook the foundation of Baiyujing, and another disaster occurred. In addition, there was another calamity that swept across several states and territories, affecting more than 100 countries and causing countless casualties. All the tragic descriptions of wars in the history books of later generations have appeared in several states. The old Taoist priest was the instigator of this catastrophe. In total, there are 3 culpas for heaven, earth, and people originating from heaven, mountains, and the human world. The Taoist ancestor once said that man follows the earth follows the sky, heaven follows the Tao, and the Tao follows nature. However, he claimed that nature follows Tao, Tao follows heaven, heaven follows earth, and earth follows man. It is clear that he wants to do the opposite of Daozu. If he was just a scholar who talked quietly or just a fanatic who liked to be unconventional, that would be fine. But the problem is that this Taoist priest of Qingming, who goes by the pseudonym Zhangjiao, once won a debate among the 3 religions with his true ability. This person's ambition in life is to teach according to directions and become a teacher through hardships. Since Taoism was not good enough in Qingming's world, the Taoist priest went to the Buddhist kingdom of the West. Except for the 2 main chairs, everything else that should come and can come is in place. The 3 positions that are still vacant at this moment are destined not to come. In addition to Sun Yuan and Han Yushu of Tongye continent, there is also Wanyan Laojing, who was once the #1 person in Jinjia continent, who had colluded with the demon clan and chose to betray Haoran. One of the heroes who stopped Wanyan Laojing, who is also present today, is Jin Jiazhou sword cultivator Zhou Xian. If he and Han Guanghu hadn't taken action together back then, the situation on the Jinjiazi battlefield would have only become more corrupt. This is a sword cultivator in the Immortal realm who is less than 200 years old. He is known as the Sword Immortal Su Jun in the mountains. Before that, Zhou Xian was unknown in his hometown of Jinjiazi, let alone being famous in the world. Zhou Xian sat upright with his sword across his knees, eyes closed and silent. He is now a guest of the Liu family in Azu. He is driving Shandu in Yuzhou south of Tongyi's Hao, and is responsible for picking up Liu's cross-continent ferry. Zhou Xian had a good impression of Luopa Mountain and had attended the opening ceremony of the Qingping sword sect. He especially admired Pei Qian, who had once punched and killed monsters in his hometown. The last time I saw Pei Qian, this arrogant swordsman gave a modest explanation, saying that he had some connections on Jinjiazi Mountain, and asked Pei Qian to report to him when he visited Jinjiazi next time, when it was not appropriate to reveal his identity. Name. Zhou Xian entered this place and occupied a place 100 years ago. At that time he had just entered the upper 5 realms. I once met an inexplicable middle-aged man. He looked unattractive and could not tell the depth of his moral character. The man only said that he was looking for a suitable person to conquer and act as a restrainer. Zhou Xian rejected the other party's deal, even if the other party pointed out a way for him to ascend. The other party did not force others to do anything difficult, but settled for the next best thing and introduced Zhou Xian here, saying that he could come here to gain experience and see the world from a different perspective. Zhou Xian and that man traveled together for several years. The latter was silent for a long time, rarely spoke and occasionally asked questions which were all big questions. Zhou Xian didn't think that he, a sword cultivator, could answer those questions at all. He even felt that there was no definite answer to those questions. There was once a question and answer, and the person asked first, in the world the reason why beauty is beautiful is because of the ugliness. The reason why good is because of the existence of evil. Zhou Xian, do you agree with this truth? Zhou Xian felt that this truth was quite superficial, so he replied, of course I agree. If the sun cannot be born, the yin cannot grow. Then what kind of world do you think is a good world? The man asked the question and quickly added, you can completely ignore whether it can be achieved and just talk about some ideal state in your mind. Zhou Xian said tentatively, the world is peaceful, the government is harmonious, the mountains are pure, and everyone practices their own cultivation. Immortals and mortals live in harmony, yin and yang operate in an orderly manner, and there is no competition between humans, gods, ghosts, and immortals. All living beings perform their duties and everything has its own place. Hearing this answer, the man smiled and asked, can I understand it this way? In other words, there are no bad people in the world, they are all good people? Zhou Xian hesitated. How to define this good or bad? Who gets to define it? As if he had guessed Zhou Xian's thoughts, the man smiled and said, then I'll leave it to you to define it. Assuming you can decide it with one word and assuming there are 100 people in the world, then I have 2 more questions. They are all good people in your mind. In the minds of those 100 people, are there really no bad people among the 99 people around you? This is the first question. The second question is what you are thinking in your heart at this moment, leaving how many bad guys? Can these 2 people really survive in this good world? If there are 10, a dozen, 20 or 30, how can you ensure that their number will be good? Isn't it going to be more and more? Let's just go back to the guest. Or is it less and less, returning to 10, 2, 1 and finally 0, returning to the situation of the first question? Zhou Xian was immediately stunned. The man thought about himself and said, the Daoist ancestor said that everything in the world is born from existence and everything is born from nothingness. Then I have another question. I want to ask about the cycle of the Tao, which is endless. Since nothing is born and everything is born, then all things will be what is born. Is it a nothing? What is the state of nothingness? By then will we human beings have a place? Faced with this trend, what should the prophets of Chunjiang Shuainwanya, who were the first to notice this trend, do? When it comes to one's own situation, is man determined to conquer heaven or do his best to obey the destiny of heaven, or is it, as the Taoist ancestor said, the opposite of the movement of Tao and the weak use of Tao? Zhou Xian wanted to reply to him, I am a pure swordsman, what should I do if I don't have all these things? The man said, if I assume that Zhou Xian is the first pure swordsman in the 15th realm in the world and there is no second 15th realm in the world, the direction of heaven and earth, the ups and downs of the world, the life and death of all living beings, and even how they are human beings, how as a human being, everything runs according to your wishes, so do you, Zhou Xian, still think these questions are meaningless? Zhou Xian could only be speechless. Pursue no mistakes and want perfection. The man said to himself, 8,000 people have the same face? Infinite face, all are average. I think it is a potential danger. Of course, this is just my personal opinion. There are people who disagree with me on the road. It's different, they say I'm unfounded, I always think the sky will fall either today or tomorrow. For example, the master of Bixiao Cave in Donghaiguan Taoist Temple. Zhou Xian, a swordsman in the Ascension realm, doesn't need to consider these things. Zhou Xian, a master in the 14th realm, can't avoid these things. When Zhou Xian heard this, he asked, can I reach the Ascension realm or even the 14th realm? The man smiled and said, no. Zhou Xian laughed angrily on the spot. He was just teasing me. That's okay. If it's not Zhou Xian, there will always be someone else. The man looked up at the sky and said, always prepare for a rainy day. It was not long ago that Zhou Xian began to understand part of the meaning of the phrase, preparing for a rainy day. Today Zhou Xian was almost silent and there was an old man with a gloomy look. He called a monk in the new 14th realm by his name, Wei Shi, I have already met Qin Pingon. Wei Shi seemed to be used to it and asked with a smile, when and where? The old man said, it's at the Yulong sect's ascension platform. Wei Shi nodded. It turns out that the old man is Tian Su, the Yuanying realm worshipper who covets the beauty of Yunzhu. With his superb acting skills he deceived Nayland Saihuan, who is cautious by nature. But he was still fished ashore by an outsider. The founder of the Yulong sect, whose pseudonym was Tian Su, couldn't help but remind him, there is such a big commotion in Xianxia Mountain, and now it is occupied by Gu Kan. With Qin Pingan's character he will definitely dig deep and dig deep. You must be careful to leave clues to the secrets here. The one who stays in Xianxia Mountain to practice Taoism is, after all, just your ghost. He and Dalong Qiu and Song Hong are both veteran members here. Although their seniority and qualifications are not as good as those of Wei Shi, they still know more inside information than several old faces including Lu Su. Wei Shi smiled and said, it's nothing. I took the initiative to go to Luolu Mountain not long ago, but I didn't go up the mountain. I sat at the foot of the mountain for a while and didn't see Master Qin, who was in retreat. I didn't see Qin Pingon, but I drank tea at the same table with a Taoist priest who was blind but not blind and had a pleasant conversation. Tian Su had a strange look on his face. After holding it in for a long time he said angrily, you are a very brave person. Previously there was a thin old man carrying a piano bag. He was alone and visited Luolu Mountain. We got along well with Jiao Lao Xianxian, who was responsible for entertaining guests, so he announced his identity. He came from Xianxia Mountain, his road name was Kongshan, and his study was named Cocoon House. He also said that when he first went up the mountain to practice Taoism he was young and frivolous, and looked down upon all the Qi practitioners in the world, leaving Sanshan alone. Of course Taoist Jiaxing didn't know what leaving only 3 mountains alone meant. However, the mountain owner Qin Pingon knew everything clearly. Just because Mr. Sanshan Jiuhe once had the kindness to step aside and give way to Wei Shi and Azu. Therefore Wei Shi was very sincere in this trip to Aquarius Continent. It was like telling Qin Pingon clearly that the old owner of Xianxia Mountain in Fuyao Continent was Wei Shi from AI Continent. However, the reason why Wei Shi was willing to appear in Luolu Mountain had more to do with Wu Shuangjiang. Wei Shi asked, Lu Zhou, now that your identity has been revealed, where do you plan to stay next? Tian Su glanced at Lu Miao, who was near Wei Shi, then looked at the empty chair and sneered, I don't have your means nor Sun Yuan's courage. Just wander around, step on the watermelon rind and slide wherever you want. Where is it? The sky once rained millet. In the Yulong sect that he founded he had to change his name to Tian Su. No matter what, he still escaped the sword disaster and got what he wanted, becoming an immortal and ascending to the throne. Whether Lu Zhou, Song Hong or Mr. Zeng, these old people who have gone through many tribulations on the road of spiritual practice always have various ways to seek immortality and achieve immortality. Lu Zhou turned to look at an empty seat and sighed for no reason. If Sun Yuan has your qualifications to practice Taoism. Wei Shi shook his head and smiled. If he had my monastic qualifications he wouldn't be so smart because there is no need. Lu Zhou said, such words really deserve a beating. Wei Shi smiled and said, there used to be many people who felt this way. Sun Yuan and Wanyan Laojing were Taoists of about the same generation. When the latter first came here he was submissive and a bit cowardly. As his level gradually increased his character changed. On the other hand, Sun Yuan was high-spirited and a very proud man at first. As his realm got higher he restrained his sharpness and finally became a man with almost no edges. Just like one becomes younger as one lives and one becomes more pessimistic as one gets older. The old Taoist priest opened his eyes and introduced himself. My poor Taoist name is Zhang Jiao and my Taoist name is Huang Tian. I am lucky enough to be in the 14th realm. My past experience is not worth mentioning. I'm just a lost dog. Perhaps except for Wei Shi, who has been practicing Taoism for more than 100 years, and Tian Wan, who is well informed, none of the dozen or so people here know the true origin of this old Taoist priest. Tian Wan knew his senior brother Zhou Zi and highly respected him. To say that this Taoist priest's skills are at least at the level of a different realm. In the three-religion debate held every century, the number of times Confucian Temple and Baiyujing won together was less than half that of Western Buddhist countries. Therefore, future generations of scholars will inevitably wonder why there are so many abbots in Buddhist temples and so few in Taoist temples. The only person in history who has won 2 debates in a row is Wen Sheng. Note: in chapter 961, young people are in a hurry. But before the debate between the three religions, Qingming Tianxia and the Western Buddhist kingdom actually began to debate. However, Qingming Tianxia lost miserably, especially in one of the debates. Bai Yujing and the 7 great Dao lineages of the world at that time sent a total of 17 Taoist officials, and lost all 17 debates. These 17 Taoist priests had to take off their Taoist temples, remove their Taoist robes and shave their heads to become monks. They became the later 17 monks of Wu. Note: Chapter 734, Staying at Furong Mountain during the snow. Later, Confucian scholars from the Confucian temple joined the debate, and it turned into a dispute between the three religions. Zhang Jiao came out of nowhere, and although it was very difficult to win, it was at least a win for Qingming Tianxia. Later, Lu Chen won beautifully and easily. Just because of Lu Chen's appearance, the debate among the three religions had to establish a new rule, which began to restrict the identity and realm of those participating in the debate. For this reason, Lu Chen went to Lotus Cave Heaven to complain to his master, saying that this rule was too personal to him, and he begged his master to help him. As a result, Daozu came and said that this rule was made by him. So last time the old scholar was at the village school where he was a student, he happened to meet the headmaster Lu, who was wandering around all day long. Over the wine table, he had a heart-to-heart talk with the latter, saying that he should have been given the unprecedented honor of being a villager. Headmaster Lu kept talking about it, but he didn't dare. The old scholar's eyes were sincere and he said, "If you dare here." Later, perhaps because he was having fun, an old scholar asked Master Lu to have a quarrel and practice his skills. If it doesn't work out, you can admit defeat and lose half of it. Each member of the council has his own territory. Except for the Middle-earth divine continent, generally speaking, there are at most 2 people per continent. For example, Beiju Luzhou and Dongbeiping's Hao have only Lu Miao and Tianwan respectively. When everyone showed their true identities, there were still a few with unfamiliar faces. For example, as the ostensible host of this ancestral hall, the identity of the Immortal from Dalongqiu, who is responsible for burning incense and discussing matters with the abbot every time, makes people confused. Xiao Longqiu, who was the master of Lin Huizhi, the master of the mountain, once played a game of chess with Han Yushu of Wanyao clan under the ancient pine on the top of the mountain. Later generations of monks were never able to break the game by placing stones on the chessboard. This is a famous interesting thing on the mountain in Tongyi's Hao. Until the young Yin Guan who visited Xiao Longqiu made a move and replaced the old with the new, it was finally a foregone conclusion. You are indeed good at chess, worthy of junior brother Xiuhu. Song Hong, aren't you afraid of being followed? It is said that the hidden official is very suspicious. We must not be blamed. Even if we don't come up to the mountain just complaining to the Confucian temple, is it enough for us to eat a pot? We are not traitors and traitors who seek to usurp the throne. Even if our identities are revealed, let alone rebels and traitors, we are heroes, right? Song Hong finally said, with Situ Mengjing here, it is unlikely that he will suspect our Daolong Qiu. To say the least, even if he has a guess without any evidence, what can he do to me? Tianwan said coldly, unless someone comes to cooperate with Chen Pingon. Luo Shan bent his fingers and rubbed his bright red nails. Without looking at Tianwan, he made a sarcastic remark, don't let the thief shout to catch the thief. Tianwan's face suddenly turned as cold as ice. Song Hong smiled and said, besides, what if there is evidence? Can it prove anything? Lu Su patted the handle of the chair and laughed heartily, that's right. By chance, the thing that suddenly became famous has stretched its hand long enough. Aquarius continent, Sword Chi Great Wall, and now Tongyer and Zhozhou, those who govern heaven and earth are either doing everything they can to support themselves in the mountains, or they are asking for credit wherever they go. Who do you think you are? Luo Shan smiled and said, why don't you say that Sherwa's hero made Juzi famous? Lu Su snorted coldly. A reckless man who is not a sword cultivator has ordinary knowledge. The great dragon Qiu of the Middle Earth has been popular for 3,000 years since the founding of the mountain by the founder. Dalongqiu Yunxiu Mansion is the location of the mountain monastery of Longbeard Immortal Lord Situ Mengjing. On the surface, there are 2 immortals and 1 Yupu realm, but Shangzong, Xiaoshan and Xiao Longqiu have not seen a new Yupu realm in more than 200 years. The only one in the Jade Pu realm, the Daolong Qiu Zhonglu Patriarch with the Taoist name Xuanzhong, is the junior disciple of the sect leader and Situ Mengjing. At the same time, almost all nascent souls are people who have little hope of reaching the upper 5 realms in this life, and they are trapped in a situation of no success. In fact, there is no need to worry about this. Song Hong, who has been presiding over discussions for many years, is already an immortal. In Daliangqiu, Song Hong was in the Jindan realm and his reputation was not outstanding. To be precise, Song Hong has been the golden elixir immortal for 7 or 8 times in Daliangqiu. He has been reincarnated again and again, changed his identity again and again, and returned to Daliangqiu to continue practicing Taoism. In fact, Daoistqiu also has a secret identity, that is, he belongs to the Fulong faction. In the Taiping Mountains, the reason why Han Yushu took the opportunity to persuade Chen Pingon to join them was that Han Yushu had communicated with the great dragon Qiu Immortal earlier. You can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Han Yushu had a role in the invitation, and Song Hong and Daoistqiu also had more room to use their methods, and successfully approached the real dragon King Zhu. Wei Shi helped to smooth things over, changed the topic and said with a smile, "I haven't seen my little friend Longbeard for many years." Situ Mengjing, who has always been indifferent to fame and fortune, has excellent popularity in the mountains. Wei Shi and Wei Shi are friends who have met each other year after year. After all, even when the old temple master and Qin Pingon mentioned Situ Mengjing, they said that Longbeard Kid was a good person. Wei Shi glanced at the 2 of them and they both nodded, indicating that it didn't matter. Wei Shi then began to introduce the true identities of the 2 of them: Lu Zhou, the founder of Yulong's sect; Song Hong, the first-generation master of Daliangqiu Mountain. The obscene deity in Fuyao Island is not well known and has few followers, but he is actually a man of great powers. He calls himself the Red-Pink Taoist Master. He laughed loudly and said, "As expected, those who can secure a position here are not unknown people." Yun Gao is very worried and wants to tell these people that the young hidden official you are wary of and try to win over but dare not act rashly is actually Mr. Zheng from Baidi City, Xing Juzhong. But Yun Jie didn't dare to tell this big secret. All forces are now quietly collecting gold and copper coins, and the price has skyrocketed. Everyone here who has extra money. I heard that the cave master of Shu is determined to win the Changyu cave. Even the thorns are gone. Just because Jing Dan, a female ghost with a lineage of Yu women's swordsmanship, appeared and disturbed him? Does this count? 2 dogs fight playoff? Xu Nanyuan laughed and said, "Temporary gains and losses are nothing. Then Gao Yi will always be short of money and encounter difficulties." Lu Su joked that after Yun Jie had passed he finished the business with Lu Miao, who had the breeze in his sleeves, and then he started to look at the ant with the red string on her wrist. She was Tianwan in the Jade Pu realm. Her position could be close to Song Hong, of course. But as I have a good senior brother. Lu Su clicked his tongue and said, "You and Bai Shang have been planning for thousands of years together, but they fell short of success and made one wrong step at a time. He just missed the opportunity to attack the 14th realm. It's pitiful, it's really pitiful. All the efforts were made in vain." Tianwan sneered and said, "A pure sword cultivator in the Ascension realm will not be a hero in any world. What's going on with Bai Shang? Why don't you just kill He Xiaoyang?" She came to his door, obviously to destroy his seclusion. This is a life-and-death hatred in the mountains, whether it's public or private. Bai Shang can hurt. How can you bear to kill someone? If I remember correctly, Chao Rong was not in the Ascension realm at that time. Even with the help of Tianjun Xieshi and Gu Qingsong, could he really stop Bai Chong from leaving the seclusion and handing over the sword? Tianwan could only pretend to be deaf and dumb. Just because that Chunyang Lian was involved. Someone looked at Luo Shan and asked, "Can you tell me a little bit about the new throne in the wild world?" Luo Shan suddenly looked awkward. Just because of the previous barbaric mountain discussion held by Mr. Bai Zhe, someone actually saw through this layer of her identity. Instead of asking her to accuse her, she asked her if she could recommend him. Zhou Qinggao even personally promised that he could take the initiative to leak some information about the wild military accounts, and use his military exploits equivalent to the mountains and rivers of Howren's half-continent territory in exchange for this secret identity. And he promises that there will never be any. Since Qin Yingguan was not willing to see me, I took the initiative to see him. This former leader of the Jiaoshan account and later a close disciple of Wenhai Zhoumi, was simply Qin Pinggan's #1 supporter. Regarding this matter, it is already a well-known fact on the top of the 2 mountains in the world. Why he was so mad is a mystery. The old Taoist priest suddenly said, "Fellow Taoists, you should pay more attention to the recent changes in martial arts. Don't always pretend to be gods on the mountain, and strive to select more people from each sect who have the qualifications to learn martial arts, especially those who have certain hope to gather together within 100 years. I dare not say how much profit there will be for a child who is blessed with martial arts, but at least it is a business that is guaranteed to make a profit, regardless of drought or flood." Regarding this matter, some people were immediately interested or their minds suddenly changed and they began to consider cultivating puppets, or they had already made plans and finalized a partner. There are also people who, after weighing the pros and cons, don't take it seriously. Wei Shi also gave a suggestion. In addition, fellow Taoists can pay attention to those small and medium-sized sects with more military monks. If possible, you can buy a few. The so-called getting started, of course, means using various means to occupy the magpie's nest, or using secret techniques to become the head of a certain immortal sect in one fell swoop, or secretly supporting such a sect. As the only in this place, the man was not interested in any of these things. In his opinion, in a declining world, people believe in ghosts, and fools seek immortality by cultivating Taoism. The old Taoist priest glanced at this obscene who deliberately did not seek canonization and smiled. This guy had a big plan. Sensing the sight of the old Taoist priest, he immediately stopped his thoughts. Previously, Tonghis Mountain selected 10 people in the history of martial arts in the continent. Note Chapter 895, Have fun tonight. There are only one male and one female grandmaster alive, Wuxia who ranks 4th and Yi Yunyun who ranks 6th. Although now in the Hauran 8 continents, it seems that anyone who is a Qi practitioner looks down on Tonghis. However, it is indeed relatively new to select the top 10 historical martial arts masters for the hometown of a continent, so this move quickly became popular in all continents. Except for the Middle-earth Divine Continent and Aquarius Continent, the other 7 continents began to check their own old almanacs inscribed with martial arts. Sales of landscape newspapers from various continents and sects have skyrocketed. With rankings there will definitely be quarrels, and if there are objections, Xianxia Di Bao will be accompanied by some expert explanations and insights, which will also promote the sales of each Di Bao. It's just that the Immortal Master's comments are indeed difficult to convince the public. A layman can watch the excitement, but an expert is qualified to tell the truth. No matter how high the level of a Taoist cultivator is, the level of a pure martial artist will always seem to be different from one another. In fact, the most effective way to convince the public is to be judged by a master of the mountaintop realm, preferably a martial artist at the end of the realm. It's just that if they were all mountain masters, especially a martial artist at the end of the mountain, who would be willing to get involved in this kind of thing? A rich man like the Lu family of Ai Aizhou would not be able to invite Pei Xiang of Lei Gong Temple to come out and express his personal opinions. For example, in Jinjiazu, who dares to ask Han Wanzhan for advice? Does he want to be punched when he is full? But there is really a master who is willing to speak up and express his opinions publicly through the Xianxia Di newspaper of Shitsi Peak. He is Wang Fusu of Luzhou Beiju. It explains in detail the 8 masters of the end of the world who are no longer alive, the strengths and weaknesses of their respective martial arts, and the pros and cons of boxing techniques. These are of course serious words. He also said that among the 2 living people in Tonghis's list of 10 people, Wuxia was ranked too high and was not worthy of his name, so he had to move a few places back. Yi Yunyun, on the other hand, was ranked too low. If Wang Fusu was a Tonghis martial artist, he would definitely be, at least he can be ranked 5th. Can he beat Yi Yunyun? He definitely can't beat her. If both parties have the opportunity to practice hard and compare their unique skills, it will be too dazzling and he will be uneasy, but it doesn't matter. He is willing to lose 3 games in a row. At most he can explain a few words to her. It was not like this before. Today is not in a good state. As soon as these words came out, several continents were in an uproar. It is said that Huang Yiyun has traveled north to have a fight with this disrespectful senior who talks dirty words. Wang Fusu continued to ask Di Bao to help spread the news, while she, Huang Yiyun, just came across the continent to ask about boxing with me. That being said, Wang Fusu had actually gone to Leigong Temple in Asia to have a drink with that girl Xiang. After all, Yi Yunyun had just reached the final level, which was when her fist power was at its strongest and her sharp edge was revealed. Yi Yugu, the founder of Pushen Yunkatang in Tonghishao, is ranked 5th. He is said to be able to defeat 3 continents with 1 person and 2 armors, and is invincible in Tonghishao, Beipingzu and Beiju Luzhou in the east. Although this immortal ancestor of the Yi family was magnificent and had begun traveling to various continents long ago, he still stopped at the level of returning to his true nature and never reached the level of the divine. Yigugu is indeed a genius. With the help of 6 immortal pictures, he understood the principles of boxing and helped the Yi family create a Yongguan avenue that combines immortality and martial arts. In addition to the 2 sects of Tongye and Yugue which are facing each other in the north and the south, there are only a handful of people and things in Tonghishao that are truly worthy of being talked about by monks from other continents, such as the good fortune of Tapingshen girl Crown Huang Ting, and Jiang Shangzhen's wandering life in Luzhou, Beiju. In addition, most of them will also know about the Pushun Yunkatang. Pushun is a sect that can both cultivate immortality and martial arts. Huang Yiyun is a female master. When Yiyugu was at a bottleneck, he had to turn around and pick up the practice again. He wanted to extend his life by reaching the Jade Pu realm. He hoped to use this path to prioritize martial arts and immortality and continue slowly beat the martial artist to strengthen his body and continue to increase his boxing spirit. It was indeed done by Yiyugu. After entering the Yupu realm, the first thing he did when he came out of seclusion was not to report to the academy and the Zhongtu Confucian temple and ask for promotion to the sect, but to reminisce with a close friend on the mountain, probably to talk to him. Join forces to fight against the domineering Tongye sect. To put it simply, Yiyugu actually planned to fight with Sun Yuan, a close friend of the Jade Guizhong in the Immortal realm, against Du Mao, the only Ascension realm in Tongye continent. But he still thought of things too simply. In other words, I think of people's minds too clearly. When Yiyugu came down the mountain, he was so full of ambition. He never thought that when he returned to the mountain his life was already hanging by a thread and he was dying. After that, for so many years, especially before and after the mountain master Yi Yunyun ascended to the Jade Pu realm, the warriors and monks of Pushun Yunkatang felt that this might be God's will. Everyone thinks that Pushun is not destined to become the sect with the title of Shanzong. So Pushun has no idea of becoming a sect so far. A natural disaster and a man-made disaster. Natural disaster means that when Yi Yunyun reaches the Jade Pu realm, there will be wild monsters invading the world. The man-made disaster is that when the founder Yiyugu went down the mountain to visit friends, he was seriously injured by Du Mao in an ambush on the way, and his level fell back to 2 gold, resulting in his death not long after returning to the mountain. Yiyugu never told anyone who the attacker was until his death. Reminiscing about old times? It is indeed a reminiscence. It's just murderous. Including Yi Yunyun, to this day, the entire Tonghishao takes it for granted that it was Du Mao who seriously injured Yiyugu back then. Kill them painfully, lest there be another Shao Tong Yi sect, or Yugui sect number 2 in the middle of the continent and take an extra piece of the pie. Who could have imagined that the real culprit would be Sun Yuan? This is also the reason why Yiyugu did not dare to mention the murderer to anyone until his death. Instead, he told Yi Yunyun not to pursue the matter. Yiyugu knew that Sun Yuan deliberately let him return to Pushun alive. He knew even more clearly that when he was lying on the hospital bed, Sun Yuan must have been in Pushun. As for why Sun Yuan made such unnecessary moves without worrying about complications, Yiyugu still couldn't figure it out. It was not until the moment before Yiyugu was about to surrender that Sun Yuan quietly appeared and told the truth, saying that someone would personally take him into the Yugui sect to practice Taoism in the future, and a path had been paved for him. And this person is either him or Sun Yuan. Nowadays there are experts in this ancestral hall who know about this matter. They once gave a final conclusion: a true hero is nothing more than this. Compared with Du Mao, the ancestor of Zhongxing of Tongye sect, in terms of scheming and means, he is really not worthy of carrying shoes for Sun Yuan of Jade Guizhong. In the early years, Sun Yuan had estimated that the total qi of Tongye continent could only support the emergence of one 14th realm monk in this continent. Of course, Sun Yuan hopes that the flowers will fall into his own family. It doesn't have to be me, it can be Jiang Shangzhen, it can be Wei Ying, or it can be someone with a lower seniority, but it must be in the Jade Guizhong. If Yi Yugus immortal skills and martial arts can one day improve each other, he will be promoted from Yupu to an immortal, especially from Guizhen to Shindao. Going forward, will Yi Yu have the chance to accomplish this? There's quite a chance. At least the chance is far greater than that of Du Mao. Of course Sun Yuan knew about the attack and death of Yi Yugu. This move harmed the harmony of heaven and earth and even hindered Taoism. Coupled with being too burdened by sect affairs, Sun Yuan was unable to break through and achieve enlightenment. The wild demon clan invaded Tongye continent, and all the old situations in the continent were destroyed. When the war came to an end, although the Yugui sect's vitality was severely damaged, it was better than the Tapingshan and Fuji sects, which had only a single seedling left, and they were far unable to win. The Tongye sect that is not close to the mountains. According to the general development of the situation, if the Wanyao sect hiding in Sanshan Blessed Land wants to establish a sect in Tonghishao, the ambitious Han Yushu must join forces with the Yugui sect. Zhong is responsible for constraining everything and suppressing the people in the north. Tongye sect will make the latter unable to raise its head in the next 1,000 years. Before Sun Yuan died generously, he resigned as head of the clan and gave way to Jiang Shangzhen, leaving this lazy guy to take the lead. But the candidate for Tonghishao 14th realm, that Sun Yuan really placed his greatest hope on was Wei Ying, or Qiu Ji, who was the reincarnation of Yi Yugu. In short, every posthumous incident was arranged neatly by the old man, and there was no need to tell Jiang Shangzhen, Wei Ying and others the truth. As the old saying goes, the predecessors planted trees for the shade, and this is probably what happened. You don't need to know the person who dug the well to drink water. Sun Yuan's biggest emotion in his life, or a knot in his heart, can be expressed in 3 words. The Yu family is poor. Note chapter 631, the light wind melts with the moon. Sun Yuan suffered greatly on his way to practice. It was a bitter experience, and only Jiang Shangzhen probably knew some unknown inside stories. Therefore Sun Yuan had to insist on making money, but the old man was not doing it for his own enjoyment, but for the sake of our descendants. Therefore, with Sun Yuan's mind and qualifications in order to help Yuguizong continue his incense, he still had to force his way through the sidelines and rise to the top. Sun Yuan once had a frank and heart-to-heart talk with Jiang Shangzhen, who failed to become the master of Jiaifeng. The two of them sat together on the steps of the Shinto mountain road. At first Jiang Shangzhen mistakenly thought that Mr. But it was rather vague and did not involve specific people or things, which made Jiang Shangzhen feel extremely aggrieved at the time. It's like living life. It's possible to make a lot of money the day after tomorrow, but what about tomorrow? Yuguizong is a sect after all. No matter how poor it is, it's not so poor that it can't open the pot, right? Jiang Shangzhen's implication was very clear. He still didn't quite agree with Mr. Sun's eagerness for quick success. There are some things that cannot be missed and will never come back again. It doesn't allow you to think about it over and over again, looking forward and backward and slowly figuring out a so-called perfect strategy. Mr. I hope that in the future, Jade Guizong will be in your hands, practice well and be able to do less things against your will and be able to do as you please. Everyone is a book and they appear in other people's books. But some people are like protagonists and some people are like passers-by. The protagonist is like a passerby in some books, and the passerby is like the protagonist in some books. If you think this statement is nonsense, you have not yet realized that you are the person in the book. If you find this sentence the most poignant, you are already a reader. The old Taoist priest who was sitting cross-legged shook his body and put down his feet. Wei Shi said, if anyone has a candidate that he thinks is a suitable candidate, he can put it forward now. This matter does not need to be included in the formal discussion process. Within Jiazi, they recruited some young people to become direct descendants of the ancestor hall and serve as candidates. For example, Lu Miao recommended Zhou Xian, a swordsman from the same continent, by Shang's only disciple. Hao Su recommended the dream traveler from Liuxiao continent, the city lord of Night Ship Appearance City, whose pseudonym was Xiao Baowan and whose real name was Xiao Benchu. Tianwan also recommended someone a few years ago, Su Jia, who returned to Xinjiang Mountain. Sun Yuan recommended a disciple of Fuji sect early on. It was this young man who later accidentally broke through the conspiracy of the wild demon tribe, making him in a sense the inaugurator of the war between the two worlds. Lu Zhou once deliberately cultivated a Yulong genealogy monk named Fu Ku. It's a pity that he is a poor man with a heart as high as heaven and a life as thin as paper. He is really useless. Mr. Xing nominated a martial artist from Luzhou, Beiju named Huang Shi. He was an unknown person, but he was rejected. Mr. Xing did not insist on his opinion. It is a pity that Lu Qingfeng, the Minister of Rites who accompanied the capital of the Great Li dynasty, could not be used by them. This person declined Mr. Zeng's recommendation. The Patriarch Hall was originally looking forward to this person's joining and had no objections. Qin Bai wanted to recommend Gong Sun Lingling. As a result, Gong Sun Lingling was first expelled from the Yingying Qingyi lineage and went to work as a cook at the Ma family's residence in Yushuan Kingdom. Then he was imprisoned by Qiyu and was detained by Qin Pingon. Can be said that he had a miserable life. In addition, there are several good seedlings who have become candidates one after another. For example, Huaiqian. His ancestor was Huayin, one of the 10 people from the Middle Earth divine continent in the past. At that time, relying on his own qualifications and prominent family background, he traveled alone to Luzhou, Beiju. In name he was escaping from a baby's marriage, but in fact he was secretly gathering his sword energy and increasing his power. But the end of Huaiqian's trip was the lighting of a natal lamp in the family ancestral hall. Just because I met a master son, who disliked Huayin's small arms and thin legs. Note in chapter 544 all the people in the boat were defeated by the enemy. There is also Liao Qingmai. Her master is Pei Bei. There is also a junior brother who is almost as famous as their master, Chao Xiai. Lu Miao was the first to speak. I proposed to make up for Lin Su. Tianwan originally had several potential candidates, but none of them came through. Gao Jianfu from Shingaozong was once a golden boy and girl with He Xiaoyang. There is also a young swordsman who used to be from Xingyang Mountain, Wu Tijing, who is known as the Little Wei and Jin dynasty, in Aquarius Island and the second Li Tuanjing. She even almost put her plan on the head of Longquan sword sects, Xiajia Beishuchong Meyer. Just because Su Jia had been recommended, and because she was entangled with Cui Dongshan and Jiang Shangzhen and had too much time to take care of herself, Tianwan no longer had the intention. Lu Miao explained, the reason why I chose Lin Su is because his previous practice was too smooth, but it became an obstacle. Lin Su can't break through the bottleneck of Yuaning realm. Now that he has failed 2 retreats, he has inner demons. There are signs. Betting on him now will definitely bring huge benefits in the future. In the early years, Qiong Lin Zong selected the top 10 young people and Lin Su topped the list. The second-ranked Zhou Xian has now reached the Jade Pu realm. And he is already on the waiting list. Qi Jinglong even became the head of the Tai Hui sword sect. The direct descendant of Lion Peak Li Lu. She's not on the list either. Yeshu Huang Shi and the female martial artist Xion Yang, this young man and woman who once fought to the death in the ring of Pailai Mountain, actually got married and each of them broke through. In addition, there is Yang Ningxin who has changed his identity to the warrior Yang Jinshan, and his younger brother Yang Ningxing, the little Tianjun of Chongxian department, also has his own future. As for Shuingshingshan fairy Lu Sui, she got a sword-raising gourd of excellent quality. It seems that among the highly anticipated talents of Beiju Luzhou on the road of cultivation, only Lin Su, the most favored one, unexpectedly remained stagnant. On the other hand, the other 9 people each had their own merits. One by one they overtook Lin Su. Tianwan frowned and said, "You have already recommended Zhou Xian." Lu Su smiled and joked. If Sect Master Lu is really capable, he would bring Bai Shang over to fill the vacancy of Sun Yuan or Wan Yen Lao Jing. I have no objection. The person who answered was not Lu Miao, but Wei Shi, who smiled and said, I don't have the ability. While Wei Shi was speaking, Lu Miao stood up and walked towards Wei Shi. His outer body, like a yang god, returned to its original position and became one with his true body. Tui Qingxian of Chuanjiao Mountain in Friazhou and Lu Miao of Qianglin sect of Luzhou in Beiju are the yin and yang gods of Wei Shi and Azu. Most of the discussion members looked at each other in shock when they saw this scene. At that time, Master Hulong was a guest of Qianglin sect and stopped at Exoshu Pavilion. The old master certainly didn't want to see how rich Qianglin Zong was. Immortal Qin Zhao looked straight at Luo Shan and asked, I want to ask you a question. What was the result of the formation and ambush in the wild world where no news was spread? Luo Shan raised his hand, narrowed his eyes with a smile and rubbed his fingers together. Qin Zhao smiled and said, Make any price you want. Luo Shan said, The mountaintop monks that could be called upon in the wild world at that time almost all came out, finally trapping a Liang and Zhuazhua. Qin Zhao asked, What happens next? Luo Shan blinked his eyes and said, I am a rotten fish and a shrimp who cannot stand on the stage. I am not qualified to participate in that carefully arranged ambush. How can I know more about the truth? Even if I heard a few words. She rubbed her fingers together again. I have to mention the price. Qin Zhao is angry everywhere. At this time some people sneered and disapproved. Two ascended sword cultivators, no matter how high their sword skills are and how powerful their killing power is, can they still break through the sky? Luo Shan smiled sweetly and said, this kind of thing can only be said in the vast world. You must not go to the wilderness to say it. As soon as these words came out there was a bit of a chill. Luo Shan thought for a while, stretched out two fingers and said slowly, I can only tell you what I know. First, during the war the situation was temporarily broken. She took back one finger and said, secondly, a Liang has also returned to the 14th realm. There was an instant uproar. Even Wei Shi was shocked. The old Taoist priest stroked his beard and smiled. More than that. This time it was Luo Shan's turn to be curious, and he looked at the old Taoist priest with a bright look. The old Taoist priest smiled and said, Chu Xing, Fei Ran, Xiao Sun and the others would have almost died if they had not been protected by the formation and had the right time and place to bring them back to life. Silence fell. The old Taoist priest said something strange and difficult to understand. Maybe this is called the vast world and the wild world. Except for the vertical and horizontal sword energy on the left and right, it is invincible and spreads all over the world. And the swordsman named A Liang finally used his natal flying sword, named Drinker. The magical power of this flying sword is just 3 words. Everyone will die. Only Wei Shi instantly understood the meaning of this sentence. The Taoist's words of spreading one's feet are actually not obscure. Barbarian world is an ordinary noun. Haoran is an adjective, used to describe a Liang and his sword energy, and world is a verb. The old Taoist priest stood up and said with a smile, it's time for us to discuss matters. A strange ancestral hall with 20 chairs previously placed. Old 20. The Taoist opens his feet and is 14th old. The Great Wall of Sword Qi, the criminal officer Hao Su. Now he has given up his position to his disciple Du Shanin, a sword cultivator in the Golden Core realm. Luo Shan, a female swordsman from the old Summer Palace's hidden official lineage. The divine continent of Middle-earth, the ancestor of the Lu family of the Yin and Yang family, Lu Su, the Immortal realm. The person who lends the knife on credit is Mr. Zheng. Ascension realm ghosts. To clean up the wronged people, Yingying Qingyi took over as the leader. Qin Bai, the female ghost fairy. In the territory of the Great Yong dynasty in the divine continent of Middle-earth, there is the Jiuzhen Immortal Pavilion, the Immortal Yunjia, and the Taoist name is Wuxia. The founder of Daoist Mountain is the Immortal Song Hong. The Taoist priest opened his feet and the Taoist name was Huang Tian. Old 14. Luxiazu Tianyu Cave Tianshu Southern Kite newly ascended. The leader of Liao Shui sect, Immortal Qin Zhao. In the past the number 1 person on the mountain in Jinjiazu was Wanyan Laojing. Did Tonggi's Hao Yu Guizong Xuanyun die in battle. In the blessed land of 3 mountains there is Han Yushu of Wanyao sect. Did in Fuyao Island, the of the Temple of Obscenity calls himself Hongfen Taoist Master. Jingyang Mountain in Aquarius Continent, Tianwan at Cornice Peak. Junior sister Zhou Xian, the founder of the Yulong sect, whose pseudonym is Tian Su and whose real name is Lu Zhou, has reached the Ascension realm. In the north is Lu Zhou Qianglin Zonglo Miao Yupu territory. Wei Shizin God. Duan Qingchen, a man from Nan Pasuozhou, calls himself Li Jing. Jinjiazu, the great sword Immortal Suxia. The great monk of the new 14th realm, Wei Shi of Aza Mountain, finally took his seat. As for the seat vacated by Lu Miao, it doesn't matter who takes it. The Taoist priest opened his feet, bowed his head and said with a smile, Mr. Zhou, fellow Taoist Qingzhu, can you show up? Zhou Zi. The man who killed the dragon was Qin Qinglu, whose Taoist name was Qingzhu. Tianwan was stunned. She really had no idea. But one of the arrivals made people feel like they were in a cloud. It's not Qin Qinglu, but an extremely tall woman with dark skin. She and the Taoist priest came here in their true form. Different from the old Taoist priest's way of appearing like quietly climbing over the wall, this strange woman almost forced her way in without caring about the owner's attitude. The woman looked blank and said, My young master has something to do, so he asked me to come here and take a seat. Except for those early discussions 3,000 years ago, Qin Qinglu had not actually participated in the discussions for many years. Wei Shi nodded and said, Your junior brother is also one of the initiators. Since all the old rules were established by the few of us, Today is nothing more than adding a new rule, allowing fellow Daoist Xia to do the work for fellow Daoist Qingzhu. Upon hearing the words, junior brother, the woman named Xia frowned, but still didn't say anything. Zhou Xian came here from Qingming Tian. He has a middle-aged appearance and wears civilian clothes and straw sandals. At first glance he looks like a roadside vendor. He said calmly, according to my deduction, it can be as short as 300 years or as long as 500 years. A new 15th realm will appear in the world. Sword of Coming Chapter 1252. Chapter 1252 20 People and Candidates. 10. When Zhou Xian said this, it was like thunder on the ground. It was such a shocking opening statement. It's like a deep and secluded mountain in spring where no visitors come all year round. Pine trees and flowers fall all the way, clouds and mist surround the doors and windows, and the sound of a flute suddenly sounds. The members of the discussion here are not fools. They know very well that there is a world of difference between having 3 15th realms in the world at the same time and having only 1 15th realm in the world. Everyone sat up involuntarily. Even Zhou Xian, who had no stage fright and always looked tired, began to hold his breath and listen carefully. They originally thought that after the founders of the 3 religions dispersed, within the next 1,000 years, all heroes would rise together. The key to the struggle was to achieve enlightenment and ascension to the immortal realm, and to take one step closer to the 14th realm of Hadao as the old ascended masters did. Just like Zhou Xian, a sword cultivator whose current level is not worth mentioning, he is extremely confident that he will have his own place on the top of the mountain in the future. Not to mention being on an equal footing with the old 14ers who are like dragons, but they can still have a few words with the new 14ers or at least with the Ascension realm. They should also listen carefully to see if what they say makes sense. I never thought that within just 300 to 500 years, there would be hope for a new person in the 15th realm to appear in the world. No matter who he is, no matter where he comes from in the world, if he achieves this great path, I believe that this person can single-handedly influence the 5 worlds. The trend of the world. As expected of the great sword Immortal who is now the #1 person in Jinjia continent, Zhou Xian was the first to ask, Sage of Ceremonies? The person who invited Zhou Xian to serve as the restrainer turned out to be Zhou Xian. Even though his appearance had changed, his demeanor and moral integrity remained the same. Zhou Xian shook his head, definitely not the Li Xing. Zhou Xian wondered, why? The old Taoist opened his feet and helped explain, first of all, Zhoumi is still alive. Although he was blocked by the Taoist body of the founder of the 3 religions, the ruins of the old heaven are blocked. But with Zhou's character and methods he will definitely have a backup in the world. He will definitely not. It is really not suitable to go further by just sitting back and watching the Sage of Rights achieve this great path, and using the Sage of Rights' own method of combining the 14 realms. Zhou Xian added, even so, whether the ceremonial saint reaches the 15th realm does not depend on whether he can do it, whether his merits are sufficient, whether careful obstruction is not a hindrance, but whether he is willing or not. For this reason, Zhou Xian even rushed to the outer world and had a frank and heart-to-heart talk with the Li Xing. At that time, Zhou Xian showed his derivation of the future world to the Li Xing. Just out there. At most, the world knows that several sages, including the great celestial master of the Longhu Mountain, died in the outer world and made great merits in the world. However, few people know that Zhou Xian and Mr. Sanshan Jiuhe can be said to be assisting the sage in that journey. The main force behind the hunt for the remnants of ancient gods. Once the Sage of Rights takes the place of the Sage Master and moves to a higher level within the Confucian Taoist tradition, becoming the Taoist master of the entire world, then the rules of the Sage of Rights will be transformed into Taoism in Jiuzhou at an extremely fast speed. Everywhere it becomes seamless and watertight. It seems that the cycle of the Great Road is becoming more and more flawless, but in Zhou Xi's eyes, the world will become stagnant, rotten and rigid in the future. This is a paradox. Zhou Xian described this situation as, the road has stopped, and all possibilities have been lost. Luo Shan was not as surprised by this as others, because he once accompanied Xiao Sun on a tour of the city, met the boss sword Immortal and overheard them chatting about a few off-topic topics. At first Xiaomin wanted to ask the boss about the character of the child. In the current world there are some old and relatively young ones who can fight, such as Bai Yujing, the second Taoist who claims to be invincible, and the one who is famous in Haoran. Jing is in the center of the huge Baidi city. Anyway, Xiao Sun reported a series of names. Probably the list she gave was more valuable than the selections of various landscape newspapers. The eldest swordsman didn't follow Xiao Sun's words in any way. In Qin Kingda's opinion, that's all about fighting ability and killing power. As the Sword Qi Great Wall where the borderline of the vast wilderness is located, and as the backbone of this 10,000-year-old city, Qin Qingdu only had two final comments. The presence of Bai Zhe in the wilderness is a misfortune for the demon clan and a great blessing for the human world. The emergence of ceremonial saints in the world is the luck of Confucianism and the misfortune of remaining guests. At that time Xiao Sun was sitting on the top of the city, holding two braids in his hands, staring blankly at the boss swordsman and asked, "What about you?" Luo Shan felt that the atmosphere was not right at that time. The boss swordsman smiled and touched Xiao Sun's head. "Don't be so insignificant. Whether you are right or wrong, we will wait until I die and you are still alive." The implication of Qin Kingda's words is quite simple. It is indeed not difficult to guess. There are only two meanings. This is in line with Luo Shan's impression of the boss swordsman. He always speaks straightforwardly and does not need the swordsman to speculate. When he was still in charge of the Sword Qi Great Wall, you Xiao Sun could just hold back your grievances. After he died, you had no one to control and you could scold him as much as you wanted. But there is a premise here. You Xiao Sun, a contemporary hidden official of the Sword Qi Great Wall, must stay alive and you cannot die before me. Or to put it more directly, it was to remind Xiao Sun not to die in the hands of Qin Qingdu, nor to do anything out of the ordinary as a hidden official. Beat, threaten, admonish? In fact, it doesn't matter. Anyway, Xiao Sun just grinned. She gently stretched out her hand to push the hand away, but she couldn't push it away at that time. The boss Zhou, who had always raised his hand to hold the braided girl's head, looked at the old neighbor in Xuandishan from a distance. Perhaps in the eyes of the boss swordsman who has a higher eye than the top, the real things that can be fought in the world are far away and right in front of you. The young people in the world today just think they know that the old blind man is very good at fighting. During the battle to ascend to heaven 10,000 years ago, many accidents occurred that were not recorded in writing at the time and are unknown to later generations. One of them was that the temple actually broke countless golden bodies of gods and opened a single path to ascend to heaven. Now the second seat of Lulu Mountain is dedicated to Xiego or Beijing. Why was it that the last time we went to Shirwanda Mountain, the old blind man behaved more politely and behaved like a local? Beijing, who is arrogant, is certainly not just because her fellow Taoist priest has lived long enough. Beijing would not be so restrained towards the master of Bixiao Cave who had not participated in the battle to ascend to the sky. He would not be able to defeat him, but the veteran cave master would not make Beijing feel admired and awed in his heart. She is polite mostly because the old viewer has a good relationship with Xiao Moha. Her husband is one of the few close friends, so she has to show respect. Now that she and Bixiao Cave master are on good terms, if she gets into trouble with Xiao Mo one day and Xiao Mo finds someone to drink with, will Bixiao Cave master not be able to put in a good word for her? Waha, what a good plan. Serving as a second seat is indeed more than enough. Luo Shan smiled and said from the bottom of his heart, Du Shanin, our Yin Guan invites your master to go to the wilderness to have a drink with her when he is free. Don't worry, it's just a drink. Du Shanin had a general impression of the new summer palace where foreigners gathered, and he never denied or concealed his dislike of Chen Pingan. However, he respected the sword cultivators of the old Yingguan lineage very much, and explained helplessly, Master, before leaving Hauran, there was no method left on the mountain that could allow master and disciple to speak temporarily. Luo Shan nodded and did not embarrass Du Shanin. He said regretfully, Yingguan has been thinking about Bai Yujing's Xinjia liquor all these years. It seems that this little plan will come to nothing. In his early years at the Jianqi Great Wall, Xiao Sun did often secretly go to the prison where the old deaf boy was in charge, mainly to drink with Hao Su, the most indifferent prison officer. Du Shanin said, Mr. Luo, whenever I have the opportunity to meet master in the future, I will definitely help deliver the message. Luo Shan smiled and said, Mr. Luo? Is it strange? Anyway, it sounds awkward to me. Who did you learn it from? What a bad habit. Du Shanin laughed dumbly. Luo Shan was naturally willing to get closer to Du Shanin, who was born as a junior in her hometown. What's more, Du Shanin is one of the few people who stayed in the old summer palace. It can even be said that Du Shanin was able to enter the prison together with his peers, Yu, under the instruction of the boss sword Immortal, and serve as the personal disciples of Hao Su and Gontang respectively. This was all foreshadowed, and it was largely due to the previous generation, the selective vision of a swordsman from the Yingguan lineage. For example, among the youngest generation of sword cultivators, Luo Shan chose Yu Yu, while sword immortal Zhou Xian fell in love with Du Shanin. The same is true for the previous generations, all of which are inseparable from the secret support and resource allocation of the Summer Palace. Often when Xiaomin sees a suitable candidate, he will wave his hand on the booklet and write 2 words, cultivate. Occasionally the word key points will be added. It's just that there are only a few people who have this honor and treatment, such as Chou Miao. Generally speaking, there is only one person in a generation, at most one person or even none. Almost all of these sword cultivators were from bad backgrounds. In Xiao Sun's words, those who have made a good fortune and landed in a wealthy family, since they don't need money to practice swordsmanship, they don't need to go to a summer palace to add icing on the cake, and they can only do good deeds to provide help in times of need. However, there are exceptions such as Guizhujie, who comes from a good family. Du Shanin hesitated for a moment and asked curiously, "Is there any conclusion on the whereabouts of a Liang and Zuozua?" There was a silver woven bag hanging around his waist, with strands of golden light shining through. Everyone present could tell at a glance that it was a fragment of a golden body that was now priceless. Luo Shan shook his head and said, "My whereabouts are unknown and my life and death are unpredictable. It seems difficult to tell clearly." Du Shanin is a swordsman who will envy a Liang and respect him sincerely. One of them is a descendant of a saint, and the other is a disciple of a saint, but they have 2 completely different styles of life. The other always boasts that he is a scholar, but everything he does on the Sword Qi Great Wall has nothing to do with being a scholar. He is a taciturn person who avoids strangers, but he values his academic career more than his sword practice. Du Shanin was born in poverty and was poor when he was young. He was not the same type of person as them. Moreover, there is a gap in seniority and age between the 2 parties. Besides, they are all singles. Therefore, Du Shanin was even more entangled in dealing with Chen Pingan. Maybe this was due to jealousy. Since they are of the same age, it is inevitable to have a tendency to compare. They all seem to have struggled to get up from the bottom of their lives in a stinky ditch or quagmire with no one to rely on. From then on, their fortunes were not bad and each had good luck. Why can Chen Pingan win Ning Yao's favor? Why can he be the master of the Summer Palace even though he is not a swordsman? Why can he go to the city every now and then to get swordsmanship instruction from the left and right, and still be able to talk to the boss swordsman? Why should all of us local swordsmen have to obey his formation and decide our life and death? Du Shanin has been to the battlefield to kill demons many times and he almost died there. So he has always been unable to let go of a certain conclusion. I think you, Chen Pingan, went to the battlefield to kill demons because you knew you would not die. As a new Yin official, the boss sword fairy would save you. So when you are on the battlefield, you never have to worry about anything. You are different from all our local sword cultivators who are ready to die, as well as your fellow sword cultivators from Hauran. Why? The old Taoist priest took out a white wine gourd with shiny pulp from his sleeve and looked at Zhou Zi. The latter nodded, which seemed to agree with the old Taoist priest's guess. He opened his feet and pulled out the wine cork, raised his head and took a sip of home-brewed water. He recalled that before going to the Buddhist country in the West, he and a fellow traveler from other places traveled to the islands of a certain state together. They also achieved 2 feats. Third, the Taoist hearts of both parties are in harmony, and the real person surnamed Lu is playing in the world, drunkenly stroking his black beard and drawing his frost sword angrily. Putting away his thoughts, Zhang Jiao then continued, "Before, the poor Taoist couldn't see clearly, he could only see it from a distance. The wild world is like a ferry crashing into your vast world with great momentum. It must be an insidious method carefully and secretly planned to try to bring the 2 worlds together, to make the right time, place and people mix them together into chaos. It is necessary to let certain chess pieces take advantage of the troubled waters. If it works, it can not only delay the departure of the Holy Master, but also benefit the outstanding fishermen of the new Master of the Wilderness and steal a piece of the pie in Hauran world. If it doesn't work, just rely on this." The Taoism of Li Xing was wasted so that Li Xing could not completely let go of his hands and feet to go to the wilderness to contain Bai Zhe, whose Taoist power was increasing day by day. Then it is easy to understand that the great monsters of the wild wilderness mobilized troops and mobilized a large number of people to besiege Aoliang and his left and right sides. It was just help replace a key point in the trajectory of the Qingdao in the wilderness, so that the abundant sword energy of the two 14th realm sword cultivators can be used as one of the powerful driving forces to drive the suspended ship of the wilderness. Lu Su said with shock on his face. Two boats collided? Why didn't we notice such a big movement? Zhang Jiao pointed at the sky and said with a smile. Everyone in the world always talks about the earth. Zhou talks about the land. But if Pindao remembers correctly, the Lu family not only owns a Xianxia, but also can cooperate with the Zhilong department responsible for surveying the land. Besides, Daoist fellow Taoist Huang Yu is also the talker of Master Tiantai Siken. The old Taoist priest was clearly rubbing salt into Lu Zu's wounds. The Lu family's Tiantai, which was used to observe the astronomical phenomena, collapsed. Lu Su smiled and did not dare to have a verbal argument with this veteran. Just because there are more monks from the 14th realm here today, you cannot not take the 14th realm seriously. In particular, Lu Su also knew about a secret incident on the top of the mountain. The 14th old man in Qingming Xianxia was not as well behaved as his own Hauran, and often tried to prevent others from joining his peers. Regarding this matter by Yujing, it's not just a matter of taking care of it every time. There was once a great monk who had half-stepped into the 14th realm, but ended up falling all the way to Immortal. He was so angry that he beat the heavenly drum and complained to a certain headmaster of Bai Yujing, asking for its fare, but it's a pity that there is no result. Lu Qin, who was in charge of world affairs for those 100 years, didn't care at all. Tianwan wanted to say a few sarcastic words to add insult to injury, but she noticed that her senior brother glanced at her, and she immediately swallowed the words that were on her lips. The old Taoist priest stroked his beard and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Lu Shen, you are indeed worthy of being said to be a talented person. Many years ago I once saw the land who secretly traveled to the Western Buddhist country in the form of a Yin god. Lu Shen, the head of the Lu family whose Taoist name is Tianbian, is responsible for the most important Taoist lineage of the family, the Sky Watchers. Although Lu Su holds the title of leader of Tiantai Siken Master, he actually has no real power. According to that Taoist fellow from Xianxia, your Taoist name is Huang Yu, but your name is Lu Su. The sky is empty and the earth is real. You didn't choose the right name. You have to blame your parents for not looking in the dictionary when you were born. Look at the Taoist named Daiju, which also means the land of the earth, and the name means the earth contains all things. This is very good, so she is in charge of the line of land officials and it is justifiable. If it weren't for the fact that Gu Qingsong was Lu Chen's unnamed disciple, Lu Su would have had a good fight with this guy. At the end of the day, Gu Qingsong also said, if you are not popular enough, you must go to the ancestral hall to burn incense and worship your ancestors. If it doesn't work, my master will definitely not want to pay attention to you. The ancestor of their Lu family was Tai Bu, one of the 6 officials of the Confucian Temple, who was responsible for preserving the Taoist book known as the ancestor of all scriptures. This book is said to be the practice experience of a Taoist priest in ancient times. 2 auxiliary scriptures were derived from this, and 1 heavenly book is hidden in the lintai of the Merit Forest of the Confucian Temple. It is said that the scriptures were born in Shiping, which was the manifestation of this book. The so-called guardianship is just a cover. The other book of the earth was under the care of the Zhilong department of the Lu family. Over the years, relying on the painstaking deductions of generations of Lu family ancestors, it was transformed into the Earth Mirror chapter. It is said that Lu Qin once read it once when he was young. When he closed the book, his face was filled with tears and he sighed that there is no limit to it. Just like a Taoist priest spreading his feet under the lotus world, I once saw an ordinary old monk who was not familiar with practicing qi. He traveled thousands of miles in the mountains and rivers for 50 years, benefiting all sentient beings along the way. Before he died, he returned to the small temple and with only 7 or 8 other monks he ascended to the throne. At the end of the sermon, the old monk looked compassionate, looked around, burst into tears, choked with sobs and uttered the words, "All living beings suffer," then closed his eyes and sat down. I think the 3 of them have something in common with a crazy person crying at the end of the road. It is difficult for ordinary people to understand such feelings. If each level of breakthrough by a cultivator is compared to a petal of a flower blooming, then countless flowers are destined to bloom in the next 10,000 years in the world. Only in the latest 15th realm, no one can get around this flower, but the monks on the mountain and the ordinary masters, All living beings without exception can get around it. After all, this being's personal likes and dislikes determine the order of the world. What is good at the top must be good at the bottom. Lu Zhou, the originator of Yulong's sect, asked, "Is it possible that it is Bai Yujing's great master who has been missing for many years?" Song Hong, the founder of Dalongqiu Mountain, smiled and said, "It can't be counted as many years." Zhang Jiao nodded and said, "Everything goes well, it's not more than 200 years. As Wei Shi said, the current 14th realm is not much different from the previous Ascension realm. The founder of the three religions chose to spread Taoism, and opportunities for Taoism came raining down. Just before the rain, tea tastes better." Zhou Zi nodded and said, "It can only be said that the possibility is very high, but the variables are not small. This trip to Qingming world is an attempt to trace the origins. Before going to the small town of Lizidongshan to set up a stall, Zhou Zi was just waiting to see what happened. Xia Shiji finally spoke and asked, "Is it Master Nephew Zheng?" I am afraid that except for herself, most of the discussion members will feel weird when they hear this title. Just like Lu Daochun, who swaggers around in a pink Taoist robe and always attracts criticism, how can he recognize Qin Qinglu as his master and call Jing Juzhong his senior brother? What's more, Jing Juzhong is also Xia Shiji's nephew. Zhou Zi said, "It's hard to say. Since both the Holy Master and Taoist Patriarch have been to Baidi City, do they agree with a certain path chosen by Jing Juzhong?" Zhang Jiao asked from the bottom of his heart, "Can that Lu Shen join the Tao?" Zhou Zi replied, "As long as I walk on the ground with my feet for a few days in a year, he is destined to be unable to follow the Tao. With Lu Shen's qualifications, no matter how outstanding he is, success in seclusion is still not something that can be achieved in a year or two. After finally seizing the opportunity, Lu Shen will immediately retreat into seclusion when Zhou Zi doesn't touch the ground while chatting. But when Zhou Zi lands, he will be forced to leave the seclusion. After trying several times, Lu Shen had to give up. It's like accepting your fate and not fighting against the sky." In short, Zhou Zi refused to give way, and Lu Shen, who had already reached the Ascension realm, was fetching water from a bamboo basket. Lu Shen was just blocked outside the door, stopped in his tracks, and his realm was stagnant. Took nearly 1,000 years. Zhang Jiao asked, "Is it because there is a dispute between the great ways and you are deliberately disgusting him?" Zhou Zi said, "No, I'm just waiting for him to take the initiative to come and chat with me." The term chatting is a pun. Zhang Jiao asked tentatively, "Mr. Zhou, are you coveting the first edition of the scripture? By borrowing stones from other mountains, you can attack jade and break the theorem of the heaven and the earth are incomplete and everything is deficient so that you can fill the gaps. Take the initiative to enter an unprecedented perfect state of the 14th realm, and you don't have to be 15 but you can always maintain the mysterious realm of pseudo-15th? Zhou Zi shook his head and said, "First of all, this is not my intention, and secondly, I must maintain the position of a bystander. If I enter the 15th realm, there is a half chance that I will be forcibly dragged to the 15th realm, the kind of involuntary horrible, not enough for outsiders to understand. Ask straightforwardly and answer sincerely." Zhang Jiao then changed the topic to a more relaxed topic and asked with a smile, "How many times have you seen that talkative guy?" Zhou Zi said, "There are only 2 times. Haoren Qingming has 1 each." Zhang Jiao said, "The situation in this place under the cover of the Pindao formation began to call him by his name. He can hide it from some of the 14th realm, but he may not be able to hide it from the sharp-sighted Master Lu. Those who taught Lu Qin and Master Lu were obviously tricked by this old Taoist priest who was still very old." Zhou Zi said, "He and Jing Juzhong, it doesn't matter even if they listen. One is most afraid of trouble and the other knows what he wants best and has no distractions. Who wouldn't envy Lu Chen's unique leisure travel? If I don't cause trouble to the world won't trouble me either. He never looks for trouble, behaves appropriately, has a moderate diet and daily life, and has acquired the Dharma, so he is the most unrestrained among the Taoist monks. Pindao is particular about what he does and is not accommodating. As long as you don't scold Pindao in person, Pindao will fall on deaf ears. If you dare to scold someone in person, don't blame the poor man for scolding you back. As for Jing Juzhong, just don't provoke him. He doesn't bother to target anyone anyway. But if he deliberately targets someone, even Zhou Zi will find it very difficult. For example, Jing Juzhong emptied Baidi City and walked quietly along the long river of time to block the road and prevent Lu Qin from returning to Baiyujing. The chaos in King Ming's world is no longer a sign of trouble, but it is obvious that chaos is happening. The Taoist officials inside and outside Bai Yujing are very clear that troubled times are coming. Even if the second headmaster Yudo was stationed in Bai Yujing and used a Yujing mountain to reach the pseudo-15th realm, facing the second joint challenge, Yudo was still alone, killing several 14th realms with his sword. This kind of feat is indeed unprecedented. It seems that the chaos has been temporarily suppressed, but in fact the undercurrent is becoming more and more intense. The Grandmaster Ko Ming still failed to unite the three religions. What if Lu Qin was stopped by Jing Juzhong again in the long river of time? With Yu Dou's always resolute and iron-fisted style, as long as there is any conflict between Bai Yujing and the various states, there will be no room for maneuver. The old Taoist priest said with a complicated mood, "To be honest, after many years I am still afraid of him. It has been so many years since he left Qingming Tianxiao, and the 14th old man still has lingering fears every time he thinks of Yu Dou. This shows that Yu Dou's prestige is profound." Zhou Xian said, "Those who are upright and selfless are the most dignified." The old Taoist priest looked miserable and murmured, "After thinking about it, I feel that I am not wrong." If he pinched his nose and had to admit that Yu Dou abided by the rules and acted without mercy, then what exactly went wrong? Zhou Xian gave two rather mysterious statements. When the heart of heaven touches the ground, changes will naturally occur. Yu Dou acquiesces that everyone is rational. Just like there are still some people who believe that everyone can change and become good. Zhou Xian will not deliberately target anyone, but he will look at the forks in the world from a distance. Lu Su asked tentatively, "But Master Lu?" After all, Lu Qin is the ancestor of his family. Even if Lu Qin doesn't think much of his disciples and grandchildren, no matter how many sacrifices are made to ancestors and incense are offered in the Lu family's ancestral hall year after year, there has never been an example of successfully inviting gods to come down in history. There have been several unspeakable hardships that the Lu family has endured by themselves. But even so, it is not a bad thing after all to have flowers blooming inside the wall and fragrance outside the wall, and having an ancestor who is the head teacher in Bai Yujing. As a certain idiot said, if you hang such a portrait of your ancestors in your family's ancestral hall, even if it doesn't work, at least it will look good. The guy said it with great assurance and a sincere look on his face. "Miss Lu, your words are rough and your reasoning is not rough, right?" At that time, Lu Zai's face was frosty. He caught the gentleman on the beam, stretched out his hand and said, "This is not the reason for you to replace the ancestor's hanging portrait with yours. Hand over the old hanging portrait. I want to put it back in the ancestral hall. He is the only one who can do such unworthy things as a son of man." During that secret visit to the Lu family, a Liang wanted to learn from Pei Min, a swordsman who was a guest of the Lu family. Otherwise, the outside world would always say that his winning record was too low. The reason why he climbed over the wall and went through the front door without passing the post was to prevent Mr. Lu from being too hospitable and treating guests with too much enthusiasm due to his long-standing reputation. As for Lu's ancestral hall, it's just a stop by. Zhou Xian smiled and said, "Headmaster Lu is not so easy to penetrate the heart and recognize himself. If you want to recognize yourself clearly, you need a mirror and a coordinate. This is difficult." Luo Shan smiled and asked, "Is it Ning Yao?" She was close to Du Shanin, not to mention Ning Yao, whom she truly treated as her junior. Even for the sword cultivators Chen Pingon and Xanin Guan, Luo Shan felt from the bottom of his heart that those young people had done a good job and were better than the old people like them. Zhou Xian didn't say anything, just shook his head. Duan Qingchen frowned and asked, "It can't be Fei Ran, right?" Ning Yao and Fei Ran, these two young swordsmen, are both the best in the world in name and in reality. Logically speaking, they do have a good chance and have an inherent advantage over anyone else. Immortal Zhou Xian asked in a deep voice, "Is it a sign that the sword cultivator Fei Fei has become the co-master of the wilderness? Is it a careful long-term plan? If this is the case, shouldn't we have made plans today? It is said that Firen is an alien from the wild monster clan and highly esteems the knowledge of rituals and saints." Zhou Xian said calmly, "I have seen Fei Ran a long time ago. He has no intention of changing the world. At most, he only has the idea of mending and improving." Wei Shi was unwilling to reveal the matter lightly and asked, "After all, times have changed, the realm is different, and the identity has changed. Will Firen not change his mind?" Zhou Xian seemed to have answered the question inappropriately. Don't worry, Firen is definitely not the incarnation of Zhou. Otherwise, Firen would not be able to become a Taoist couple with Dioku. Wei Shi smiled and said nothing more. Yunjia was frightened when he heard this. He didn't seem to talk about this kind of thing when discussing matters in the past. Why do Zhou Zi and the others seem to sound like as long as Firen has this intention, they will give out a plan today and take action against Firen tomorrow? Wei Shi said, be careful of that unknown person in the wilderness. Zhou Zi nodded. He is indeed hiding his secrets. Bai Zhe was probably hesitant before whether to wake this person up. Du Shanin suddenly asked, I heard that the founder of the 3 religions traveled around the world, just like going from house to house. He would be overwhelmed by the will of heaven and earth of other houses, so to a large extent he had to follow the local customs and abide by the host and guest. There are other rules. Otherwise, even if the 2 people in the 15th realm have not met, their Tao Qi will be in conflict and they will be forced to trigger a Tao dispute. Only barbarian world is an alien, and the Tao roots are only different from those of the 3 religions. Then can I understand that once a Qi refiner in the wilderness takes the lead in reaching the 15th realm, several worlds in the human world will merge? No one can stop it? Zhou Zi nodded and said, you can say that. He spread his legs and stroked his beard, smiled, narrowed his eyes and asked, what a great insight. Whose son is this? Wei Shi smiled and introduced, he is the former executioner of the great sword Qi Wall and the direct disciple of Jianxiu Haosu. Zhang Jiao nodded and said, the famous names of Haosu and Pindao are all heard in the Buddhist countries in the West. The founders of the 3 religions all belong to their respective worlds, but for thousands of years they almost never show up in their own homes, and naturally they never visit each other. Just to avoid Taoism transforming the world. For example, Taozu seems to have only disclosed his whereabouts, riding a green bull in the appearance of a young Taoist boy, and only visited the wild world once. In the eyes of some great monks in later generations, Daoist's move was a bit bullying. Because of this, the 3 worlds of Confucianism, Buddhism and Taoism can live in peace with each other and maintain a generally harmonious state of neighborliness. If the 4 worlds are regarded as 4 families, then each has its own family tradition. The world respects Confucianism, but the Confucian temple has not dismissed hundreds of schools of thought. However, it is also afraid that on the road there will be corrupt Confucian Taoists who think they are selfless, occupy important positions, like to do everything with reason and kill people, have a clear conscience and are mean to the world. He was afraid that the rules would be too rigid and immobilize everyone, so Li Xing would never take that step unless absolutely necessary. He was probably in a similar situation to Bai Zhe. No wonder they are such close friends. On the side of Qingming Tianxia, because they pay attention to the harmony of yin and yang, the number of female monks standing on the top of the mountain is relatively the largest. Daozu stayed out of the matter and chose to let the 3 head disciples take turns taking charge of the affairs for 100 years. This was a choice that would not cause corruption or beetroots. There were 3 catastrophes in the world that were full of variables. First, the great ancestor of the wilderness secretly refined one of the ascension platforms into Tuyue Mountain, trying to reconnect the earth and heaven. Step by step he connected with the underworld and helped the demon clan Qi practitioners and some heroic spirits who died in the battle to ascend to the sky. Take them under your command, recreate gods and reshape heaven. The second is the rise of the great demon to create the Hall of Heroes, pointing out a more extreme and feasible path for the wild world, weakening all living beings in the world and strengthening a handful of great demons. The last disaster was, of course, the extremely disappointed Howren Jiaxing, who became a well-known scholar in the wild world. He secretly ate a bunch of great monsters, making the world thin and fattening himself. Since he failed to annex Howren in one go, Zhou took advantage of the opportunity to eat again and again, so he had no choice but to leave in the sky and change the battlefield. This has brought a huge hidden danger to the wild world. If Bai Zhe hadn't returned to the wild world and awakened the ancient demons who had been sleeping for thousands of years, coupled with Bai Zhe's own weird way of joining the Tao, any 10 the monks in all 4 realms felt extremely fearful. Then in the new wilderness, the lack of top combat power will make Howren Xianxia's counterattack on the wilderness become overwhelming, and there will be no suspense about victory or defeat. The first calamity was settled by 3 sword cultivators. In the second game, Daozu appeared in person and suppressed it with one hand. Therefore, it is inevitable that future generations will not feel deeply about the mountain. The third game caused pain to both the worlds. Thinking back to that year, 3 sword cultivators left the Sword Qi Great Wall and rushed to Tuyue Mountain. Someone asked, "If the resentment is so great, why are you still willing to follow me?" Someone replied, "I'm not helping those Confucian scholars or even Qin Qingdu. I think those old friends who are dead will definitely not be willing to be forced to work as thugs." As for the sword cultivator who had been silent, the moment he could see Tuyue Mountain in the distance, he finally spoke and said to himself, "I have been protected by all of you on the road of cultivation, and it is time for me to protect the human world. It's hard to find this world, so we can't go back to the same old path." They are Qin Qingdu Longjun Guanzhao. Each has his own flying sword, named Duckweed, and the immortal tomb of the great ruins is like a long river of time. Mr. Zheng asked with a smile, "Mr. Zhou, did you miss someone?" Everyone present suddenly understood and the atmosphere suddenly became weird. Zhou Zi smiled and said, "Me?" He shook his head to himself and laughed at himself. How can he be a fish that slips through the net when he calls himself a man who lets the net dry and mends the net? When he cooperated with the Li Xing and traveled far away together, Zhou Zi brought 5 bags of soil, and together with the talismans of Mr. Sanshan Jiuho, he finally succeeded in paving 5 roads that were too long to be calculated. Therefore, when Zhou Zi's 5-color soil is used up, the road to the chase ends, and Li Xing and the others must turn around and return. It's just that there are people here who have a slight thought, and if the net leaks, the fish swallows the boat. Wouldn't it be better if Zhou Zi is the one? Just next door, there is a separate ancestral hall. The people present are all candidates, and the number of people is less than 15 for now. Among them are Xiao Benchu from Liuxia Continent, Zhou Xian from Beiju Luzhou, Su Jia from Xingyang Dogwood Peak, Huai Qian from Zhongtu Shenzhou, and Na Dumiao from Fuji Sect in Tongye Continent and others. There was a young monk named Su Jia who used to work as a waiter at Daixuanshan Huangliang liquor shop. There are still a few people from other worlds, such as a middle-aged man wearing a large frost armor, holding a knife in both hands, dozing off. His hometown is Fuyazhou, but now his true body is in the colorful world and he continues to be the emperor. There was a wandering Taoist priest with an official Taoist name, chatting with a Nanpajuo monk who liked fishing. At first everyone was talking about their own things, but soon everyone got involved and expressed their opinions because of a certain topic. Some people say that just 2 sword cultivators can go deep into the hinterland of the wilderness and cut the world apart. The demon clan is so helpless. How can we fight this battle now? We should surrender as soon as possible. When Su Jia heard this statement, he immediately became unhappy, saying that they were not ordinary ascended realm sword cultivators. Although Liang still owed a lot of money to his own shop and let down his young lattice infatuation, Su Jia still had to say something fair for the guy in this matter. Someone soon agreed with Su Jia's point of view, and added that someone who had returned to the wilderness, neither he nor the group of ancient demons seemed to have participated in the siege. The young Taoist priest named Wang Wu then joked and said that if Xiaodao's calculations were correct, they would have all reached the 14th realm during the siege. The man holding a knife in both hands and wearing a large frost armor opened his eyes and asked, "In this case, how can we fight those wild beasts? Are they seriously injured? How many people have died?" Taoist Wang Wu sighed and said, "For some reason, none of the wild demon tribes who participated in the encirclement and suppression, including Zhang Lu, the sword immortal who rebelled against the Sword Qi Great Wall, died." On the other side, Zhang Jiao said, "Let's talk about the second thing now. Is there anyone willing to intervene in Qing Ming's mess?" Wei Shi seemed not surprised by this and said with a smile, "You have to let someone choose a side, right?" Zhou Zi said, "Of course you can choose both sides. Tongyi's Hao Yulindu Siue Liuguang." On top of the ferry boat there is a wine table. People from different hometowns are gathered together. Chen Pingon was just a little drunk, but Feng Shuetao was constantly persuaded by Cui Dongshan to drink. It was obvious that he was a little drunk and he started to talk without restraint, saying that Lu Jubao and Wei Shi were 2 losers and they couldn't compete with each other. Chen Pingon smiled and refused to talk. Pei Qian looked strange. After all, this personal grudge between the 2 continents involved a certain black and white master of Beiju Luzhou, and this old man happened to be closely related to his Lulu mountain. Cui Dongshan didn't care about this. Hiccups of wine, full of righteous indignation, he said yes, it was the bold senior Qingmi who was a master of arts who should take the lead in pulling strings, especially to get an explanation from the Lion Peak in Luzhou, Beiju. At this moment Feng Shuatao felt a little chill on his back and soon a palm pressed down on his head and he said with a smile, "You can say some stupid things and you can't steal anything. These words are hurtful. At the end of the journey people speak softly. I saw Lu Kaishan and Wei Shiwao walking. I have never dared to let out a fart. Come on, I will apologize to you and make up for it. I will punish myself with a few drinks." Feng Shuatao shrank his neck and remained silent. Seeing that the opportunity was bad, Cui Dongshan was about to run away, but he stood up and froze in place. The old man twisted his beard and smiled and said, "Want to run away? Do you without wiping your butt?" In addition to the real Huolong who held down Feng Zueto's head and then used the immobilization technique on Cui Dongshan, there was also a dashing Taoist priest with a long beard and a sword on his back who appeared on the ferry. It was Chunyang Luyen. Qin Pingon immediately understood, stood up and walked away with Taoist Lu Yen. The latter laughed in his heart and said, "I have chosen a place to sharpen my Taoist heart and I will leave soon. Don't worry, wait until one day you are really free. Go over there to help protect the road, it's time to worry about it." Qin Pingon asked curiously, "Where?" Lu Yen said, "One of the only two in the world, the cave, heaven and blessed land are connected. Nowadays among the 5 worlds, in addition to the Lotus Cave Heaven and the Lotus Flower Blessed Land, which are connected by the Cave Heaven Blessed Land, there is actually another place." Note chapter 320, The Old Taoist at the Wellhead. Qin Pingon nodded. This choice was indeed unexpected and reasonable. Lu Yen hesitated for a moment and reminded, "There are strict rules there. Master Qin may need to be like a poor man and temporarily forget his past." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "There's nothing to be embarrassed about. Just do as the Romans do.